Book 4. The Passion of the Queen. Part 2. Here paused the Queen. Unmoved he holds his eyes by Jove's command, nor suffered love to rise, though heaving in his heart, and thus at length replies: Fair Queen, you never can enough repeat your boundless favours, or I own my debt; nor can my mind forget Eliza's name, while vital breath inspires this mortal frame. This only let me speak in my defence: I never hoped a secret flight from hence, much less pretended to the lawful claim of sacred nuptials, or a husband's name. For if indulgent heav'n would leave me free, and not submit my life to fate's decree, my choice would lead me to the Trojan shore, those relics to review, their dust adore, and Priam's ruin'd palace to restore. But now the Delphian oracle commands, and fate invites me to the Latian lands. That is the promis'd place to which I steer, and all my vows are terminated there. If you, a Tyrian and a stranger born, with walls and towers a Libyan town adorn, why may not we, like you a foreign race, like you seek shelter in a foreign place? As often as the night obscures the skies with humid shades, or twinkling stars arise, Anchises' angry ghost in dreams appears, chides my delay, and fills my soul with fears. And young Ascanius justly may complain, defrauded of his fate and destin'd reign. Even now the herald of the gods appear'd; waking I saw him, and his message heard. From Jove he came, commission'd, heav'nly bright, with radiant beams, and manifest to sight. The sender and the sent I both attest. These walls he enter'd, and those words express'd: Fair Queen, oppose not what the gods command. Forc'd by my fate, I leave your happy land. Thus while he spoke, already she began with sparkling eyes to view the guilty man. From head to foot survey'd his person o'er, nor longer these outrageous threats forbore. False as thou art, and more than false, forsworn! Not sprung from noble blood, nor goddess born, but hewn from harden'd entrails of a rock, and rough Hyrcanian tigers gave thee suck. Why should I fawn? What have I worse to fear? Did he once look, or lent a list'ning ear, sigh'd when I sobb'd, or shed one kindly tear? All symptoms of a base ungrateful mind, so foul that, which is worse, 'tis hard to find. Of man's injustice why should I complain? The gods and Jove himself behold in vain triumphant treason, yet no thunder flies, nor Juno views my wrongs with equal eyes. Faithless is earth, and faithless are the skies. Justice is fled, and truth is now no more. I sav'd the shipwrack'd exile on my shore, with needful food his hungry Trojans fed. I took the traitor to my throne and bed. Fool that I was! 'Tis little to repeat the rest. I stor'd and rigg'd his ruin'd fleet. I rave, I rave. A god's command he pleads, and makes heav'n accessary to his deeds. Now Lycian lots, and now the Delian god, now Hermes is employ'd from Jove's abode to warn him hence, as if the peaceful state of heav'nly powers were touch'd with human fate. But go, thy flight no longer I detain. Go, seek thy promis'd kingdom through the main. Yet, if the heav'ns will hear my pious vow, the faithless waves, not half so false as thou, or secret sands, shall sepulchres afford to thy proud vessels, and their perjur'd lord. Then shalt thou call on injur'd Dido's name. Dido shall come in a black sulphury flame, when death has once dissolv'd her mortal frame; shall smile to see the traitor vainly weep. Her angry ghost, arising from the deep, shall haunt thee waking, and disturb thy sleep. At least my shade thy punishment shall know, and fame shall spread the pleasing news below. Abruptly here she stops, then turns away her loathing eyes, and shuns the sight of day. Amazed he stood, revolving in his mind what speech to frame, and what excuse to find. Her fearful maids their fainting mistress led, and softly laid her on her ivory bed. But good Aeneas, though he much desir'd to give that pity which her grief requir'd, though much he mourn'd and labour'd with his love, resolv'd at length, obeys the will of Jove, reviews his forces. They with early care unmoor their vessels, and for sea prepare. The fleet is soon afloat in all its pride, and well calk'd galleys in the harbour ride. Then oaks for oars they fell'd, or, as they stood, of its green arms despoil'd the growing wood, studious of flight. The beach is cover'd o'er with Trojan bands that blacken all the shore. On every side are seen, descending down, thick swarms of soldiers loaden from the town. Thus in battalia march embodied ants, fearful of winter and of future wants, to invade the corn, and to their cells convey the plunder'd forage of their yellow prey. The sable troops, along the narrow tracks, scarce bear the weighty burthen on their backs. Some set their shoulders to the pond'rous grain, some guard the spoil, some lash the lagging train. All ply their sev'ral tasks, and equal toil sustain. What pangs the tender breast of Dido bore, when from the tow'r she saw the cover'd shore, and heard the shouts of sailors from afar, mix'd with the murmurs of the wat'ry war! All-pow'rful Love, what changes canst thou cause in human hearts subjected to thy laws! Once more her haughty soul the tyrant bends, to pray'rs and mean submission she descends. No female arts or aids she left untried, nor counsels unexplor'd, before she died. Look, Anna, look, the Trojans crowd to sea! They spread their canvas, and their anchors weigh. The shouting crew their ships with garlands bind, invoke the sea gods, and invite the wind. Could I have thought this threat'ning blow so near, my tender soul had been forewarn'd to bear. But do not you my last request deny; with yon perfidious man your interest try, and bring me news, if I must live or die. You are his favourite, you alone can find the dark recesses of his inmost mind. In all his trusted secrets you have part, and know the soft approaches to his heart. Haste then, and humbly seek my haughty foe. Tell him, I did not with the Grecians go, nor did my fleet against his friends employ, nor swore the ruin of unhappy Troy, nor mov'd with hands profane his father's dust. Why should he then reject a suit so just? Whom does he shun? And whither would he fly? Can he this last, this only prayer deny? Let him at least his dangerous flight delay, wait better winds, and hope a calmer sea. The nuptials he disclaims I urge no more. Let him pursue the promis'd Latian shore. A short delay is all I ask him now, a pause of grief, an interval from woe, till my soft soul be temper'd to sustain accustom'd sorrows, and inur'd to pain. If you in pity grant this one request, my death shall glut the hatred of his breast. This mournful message pious Anna bears, and seconds with her own her sister's tears. But all her arts are still employ'd in vain. Again she comes, and is refus'd again. His harden'd heart nor pray'rs nor threat'nings move. Fate and the god had stopp'd his ears to love. As when the winds their airy quarrel try, Justling from every quarter of the sky, this way and that the mountain oak they bend, his boughs they shatter, and his branches rend, with leaves and falling mast they spread the ground, the hollow valleys echo to the sound. Unmov'd, the royal plant their fury mocks, or, shaken, clings more closely to the rocks. For as he shoots his tow'ring head on high, so deep in earth his fix'd foundations lie. No less a storm the Trojan hero bears. Thick messages and loud complaints he hears, and bandied words still beating on his ears. Sighs, groans, and tears proclaim his inward pains. but the firm purpose of his heart remains. The wretched queen, pursued by cruel fate, begins at length the light of heav'n to hate, and loathes to live. Then dire portents she sees, to hasten on the death her soul decrees. Strange to relate! For when, before the shrine, she pours in sacrifice the purple wine is turn'd to putrid blood, and the white offer'd milk converts to mud. This dire presage to her alone reveal'd, from all, and ev'n her sister, she conceal'd. A marble temple stood within the grove, sacred to death and to her murder'd love. That honour'd chapel she had hung around with snowy fleeces, and with garlands crown'd. Oft, when she visited this lonely dome, strange voices issued from her husband's tomb. She thought she heard him summon her away, invite her to his grave, and chide her stay. Hourly 'tis heard, when with a boding note the solitary screech owl strains her throat, and on a chimney's top or turret's height, with songs obscene disturbs the silence of the night. Besides, old prophecies augment her fears, and stern Aeneas in her dreams appears, disdainful as by day. She seems alone to wander in her sleep, through ways unknown, guideless and dark, or in a desert plain to seek her subjects, and to seek in vain. Like Pentheus, when, distracted with his fear, he saw two suns and double Thebes appear; or mad Orestes, when his mother's ghost full in his face infernal torches toss'd, and shook her snaky locks, he shuns the sight, flies o'er the stage, surprised with mortal fright. The Furies guard the door, and intercept his flight. Now, sinking underneath a load of grief, from death alone she seeks her last relief. The time and means resolved within her breast, she to her mournful sister thus address'd. Dissembling hope, her cloudy front she clears, and a false vigour in her eyes appears. "Rejoice," she said, "instructed from above, my lover I shall gain, or lose my love. Nigh rising Atlas, next the falling sun, long tracts of Ethiopian climates run. There a Massilian priestess I have found, honour'd for age, for magic arts renown'd. The Hesperian temple was her trusted care; 'twas she supplied the wakeful dragons fair. She poppy seeds in honey taught to steep, reclaim'd his rage, and soothed him into sleep. She watch'd the golden fruit. Her charms unbind the chains of love, or fix them on the mind. She stops the torrents, leaves the channel dry, repels the stars, and backwards bears the sky. The yawning earth rebellows to her call, pale ghosts ascend, and mountain ashes fall. Witness, ye gods, and thou my better part, how loath I am to try this impious art. Within the secret court, with silent care, erect a lofty pile, exposed in air. Hang on the topmost part the Trojan vest, spoils, arms, and presents of my faithless guest. Next, under those the bridal bed be placed, where I my ruin in his arms embraced. All relics of the wretch are doom'd to fire, for so the priestess and her charms require." Thus far she said, and farther speech forbears. A mortal paleness in her face appears. Yet the mistrustless Anna could not find the secret funeral in these rites design'd, nor thought so dire a rage possess'd her mind. Unknowing of a train conceal'd so well, she fear'd no worse than when Sichaeus fell, therefore obeys. The fatal pile they rear within the secret court, exposed in air. The cloven holms and pines are heap'd on high, and garlands on the hollow spaces lie. Sad cypress, vervain, yew compose the wreath, and every baleful green denoting death. The queen, determin'd to the fatal deed, the spoils and sword he left in order spread, and the man's image on the nuptial bed. And now, the sacred altars placed around, the priestess enters, with her hair unbound, and thrice invokes the powers below the ground, night, Erebus and Chaos she proclaims, And threefold Hecate with her 100 names, And 3 Dianas. Next she sprinkles round With feign'd Avernian drops the hallow'd ground; Culls hoary simples, found by Phoebe's light, With brazen sickles reap'd at noon of night; Then mixes baleful juices in the bowl, And cuts the forehead of a new-born foal, Robbing the mother's love. The destin'd queen observes, assisting at the rites obscene. A leaven'd cake in her devoted hands She holds, and next the highest altar stands. One tender foot was shod, the other bare; Girt was her gather'd gown, and loose her hair. Thus dress'd, she summon'd with her dying breath The heavens and planets conscious of her death, And every pow'r, if any rules above, Who minds or who revenges injur'd love. 'Twas dead of night, when weary bodies close Their eyes in balmy sleep and soft repose. The winds no longer whisper through the woods, Nor murmuring tides disturb the gentle floods. The stars in silent order moved around, And peace with downy wings was brooding on the ground. The flocks and herds and party-colour'd fowl, Which haunt the woods or swim the weedy pool, Stretch'd on the quiet earth securely lay, Forgetting the past labours of the day. All else of nature's common gift partake; Unhappy Dido was alone awake. Nor sleep nor ease the furious queen can find; Sleep fled her eyes as quiet fled her mind. Despair and rage and love divide her heart; Despair and rage had some, but love the greater part. Then thus she said within her secret mind: What shall I do? What succour can I find? Become a suppliant to Iarba's pride, And take my turn to court and be denied? Shall I with this ungrateful Trojan go, Forsake an empire and attend a foe? Himself I refuged, and his train relieved, 'Tis true; but am I sure to be received? Can gratitude in Trojan souls have place? Laomedon still lives in all his race. Or shall I seek alone the churlish crew, Or with my fleet their flying sails pursue? What force have I but those whom scarce before I drew reluctant from their native shore? Will they again embark at my desire, Once more sustain the seas, and quit their second Tyre? Rather with steel thy guilty breast invade, And take the fortune thou thyself hast made. Your pity, sister, first seduced my mind, Or seconded too well what I design'd. These dear-bought pleasures had I never known, Had I continued free, and still my own, Avoiding love, I had not found despair, But shar'd with savage beasts the common air; Like them, a lonely life I might have led, Not mourn'd the living, nor disturb'd the dead. These thoughts she brooded in her anxious breast. On board the Trojan found more easy rest. Resolv'd to sail, in sleep he pass'd the night, And order'd all things for his early flight. To whom once more the winged god appears; His former youthful mien and shape he wears, And with this new alarm invades his ears. "Sleep'st thou, O goddess born? And canst thou drown thy needful cares So near a hostile town, beset with foes? Nor hear'st the western gales invite thy passage, And inspire thy sails? She harbours in her heart a furious hate, And thou shalt find the dire effects too late. Fix'd on revenge, and obstinate to die, Haste swiftly hence, whilst thou hast pow'r to fly. The sea with ships will soon be cover'd o'er, And blazing firebrands kindle all the shore. Prevent her rage while night obscures the skies, And sail before the purple morn arise. Who knows what hazards thy delay may bring? Woman's a various and a changeful thing." Thus Hermes in the dream; then took his flight Aloft in air unseen, and mix'd with night. Twice warn'd by the celestial messenger, The pious prince arose with hasty fear; Then rous'd his drowsy train without delay, Haste to your banks, your crooked anchors weigh, and spread your flying sails, and stand to sea. A god commands; he stood before my sight, and urg'd us once again to speedy flight. O sacred pow'r, what pow'r soe'er thou art, to thy blest orders I resign my heart. Lead thou the way, protect thy Trojan bands, and prosper the design thy will commands." He said, and, drawing forth his flaming sword, his thund'ring arm divides the many-twisted cord. An emulating zeal inspires his train; they run, they snatch, they rush into the main. With headlong haste they leave the desert shores, and brush the liquid seas with lab'ring oars. Aurora now had left her saffron bed, and beams of early light the heavens o'erspread, when from a tow'r the queen, with wakeful eyes, saw day point upward from the rosy skies. She look'd to seaward, but the sea was void, and scarce in ken the sailing ships descried. Stung with despite, and furious with despair, she struck her trembling breast, and tore her hair. "And shall th' ungrateful traitor go," she said, "my land forsaken, and my love betray'd? Shall we not arm, not rush from every street, to follow, sink, and burn his perjur'd fleet? Haste, haul my galleys out, pursue the foe, bring flaming brands, set sail, and swiftly row. What have I said? Where am I? Fury turns my brain, and my distemper'd bosom burns. Then, when I gave my person and my throne, this hate, this rage had been more timely shown. See now the promis'd faith, the vaunted name, the pious man, who, rushing through the flame, preserv'd his gods, and to the Phrygian shore the burthen of his feeble father bore. I should have torn him piecemeal, strow'd in floods his scatter'd limbs, or left expos'd in woods, destroy'd his friends and son, and from the fire have set the reeking boy before the sire. Events are doubtful which on battles wait, yet where's the doubt to souls secure of fate? My Tyrians, at their injur'd queen's command, had toss'd their fires amid the Trojan band, at once extinguish'd all the faithless name, and I myself, in vengeance of my shame, had fall'n upon the pile to mend the funeral flame. Thou sun, who view'st at once the world below, thou Juno, guardian of the nuptial vow, thou Hecate, hearken from thy dark abodes. Ye Furies, fiends, and violated gods, all powers invoked with Dido's dying breath, attend her curses, and avenge her death. If so the fates ordain, and Jove commands, th' ungrateful wretch should find the Latian lands, yet let a race untam'd, and haughty foes, his peaceful entrance with dire arms oppose. Oppress'd with numbers in th' unequal field, his men discourag'd, and himself expell'd, let him for succour sue from place to place, torn from his subjects and his son's embrace. First let him see his friends in battle slain, and their untimely fate lament in vain. And when at length the cruel war shall cease, on hard conditions may he buy his peace. Nor let them then enjoy supreme command, but fall untimely by some hostile hand, and lie unburied on the barren sand. These are my pray'rs, and this my dying will; and you, my Tyrians, every curse fulfil. Perpetual hate and mortal wars proclaim against the prince, the people, and the name. These grateful off'rings on my grave bestow, nor league nor love the hostile nations know. Now, and from hence, in every future age, when rage excites your arms, and strength supplies the rage, rise some avenger of our Libyan blood, with fire and sword pursue the perjur'd brood. Our arms, our seas, our shores oppos'd to theirs, and the same hate descend on all our heirs. This said, within her anxious mind she weighs the means of cutting short her odious days. Then to Sichaeus' nurse she briefly said, for when she left her country hers was dead: "Go, Barce, call my sister; let her care the solemn rites of sacrifice prepare, the sheep and all th' atoning off'rings bring. Sprinkling her body from the crystal spring with living drops, then let her come, and thou with sacred fillets bind thy hoary brow. Thus will I pay my vows to Stygian Jove, and end the cares of my disastrous love. Then cast the Trojan image on the fire, and as that burns, my passions shall expire. The nurse moves onward, with officious care, and all the speed her aged limbs can bear. But furious Dido, with dark thoughts involved, shook at the mighty mischief she resolved. With livid spots distinguish'd was her face, red were her rolling eyes, and discomposed her pace. Ghastly she gazed, with pain she drew her breath, and nature shiver'd at approaching death. Then swiftly to the fatal place she pass'd, and mounts the funeral pile with furious haste. Unsheath'd the sword the Trojan left behind, not for so dire an enterprise design'd. But, when she view'd the garments loosely spread, which once he wore, and saw the conscious bed, she paus'd, and with a sigh the robes embrac'd. Then on the couch her trembling body cast, repress'd the ready tears, and spoke her last. "Dear pledges of my love, while Heav'n so pleas'd, receive a soul of mortal anguish eas'd. My fatal course is finish'd, and I go, a glorious name, among the ghosts below. A lofty city by my hands is razed, Pygmalion punish'd, and my lord appeas'd. What could my fortune have afforded more, had the false Trojan never touch'd my shore?" Then kiss'd the couch, and "Must I die," she said, "and unreveng'd? 'Tis doubly to be dead. Yet ev'n this death with pleasure I receive: On any terms, 'tis better than to live. These flames from far may the false Trojan view, These boding omens his base flight pursue." She said, and struck. Deep enter'd in her side the piercing steel, with reeking purple dyed. Clogg'd in the wound the cruel weapon stands, the spouting blood came streaming on her hands. Her sad attendants saw the deadly stroke, and with loud cries the sounding palace shook. Distracted from the fatal sight, they fled, and through the town the dismal rumour spread. First from the frighted court the yell began, redoubled, thence from house to house it ran. The groans of men, with shrieks, laments, and cries Of mixing women, mount the vaulted skies. Not less the clamour, than if ancient Tyre, Or the new Carthage, set by foes on fire. The rolling ruin, with their lov'd abodes, Involv'd the blazing temples of their gods. Her sister hears, and, furious with despair, She beats her breast, and rends her yellow hair, And, calling on Eliza's name aloud, Runs breathless to the place, and breaks the crowd. Was all that pomp of woe for this prepar'd? These fires, this funeral pile, these altars rear'd? Was all this train of plots contriv'd, said she, All only to deceive unhappy me? Which is the worst? Didst thou in death pretend To scorn thy sister, or delude thy friend? Thy summon'd sister and thy friend had come, One sword had serv'd us both, one common tomb. Was I to raise the pile the pow'rs invoke, Not to be present at the fatal stroke? At once thou hast destroy'd thyself and me, Thy town, thy senate, and thy colony. Bring water, bathe the wound, while I in death Lay close my lips to hers, and catch the flying breath." This said, she mounts the pile with eager haste, And in her arms the gasping queen embrac'd. Her temples chaf'd, and her own garments tore, To staunch the streaming blood, and cleanse the gore. Thrice Dido tried to raise her drooping head, And fainting thrice fell grov'ling on the bed. Thrice op'd her heavy eyes, and sought the light, But having found it, sicken'd at the sight, And clos'd her lids at last in endless night. Then Juno, grieving that she should sustain a death so lingering and so full of pain, sent Iris down to free her from the strife of labouring nature, and dissolve her life. For, since she died, not doom'd by Heaven's decree, of her own crime, but human casualty and rage of love, that plunged her in despair, the sisters had not cut the topmost hair which Proserpine and they can only know, nor made her sacred to the shades below. Downward the various goddess took her flight, and drew 1,000 colours from the light, then stood above the dying lover's head, and said, I thus devote thee to the dead, this offering to the infernal gods I bear. Thus while she spoke, she cut the fatal hair. The struggling soul was loosed, and life dissolved in air. End of Book 4.
Book 5, Games and a Conflagration, Part 1. Meantime the Trojan cuts his watery way, fixed on his voyage through the curling sea. Then, casting back his eyes with dire amaze, sees on the Punic shore the mounting blaze. The cause unknown, yet his presaging mind the fate of Dido from the fire divined. He knew the stormy souls of womankind, what secret springs their eager passions move, how capable of death for injured love. Dire auguries from thence the Trojans draw, till neither fires nor shining shores they saw. Now seas and skies their prospect only bound, an empty space above, a floating field around. But soon the heavens with shadows were o'erspread, a swelling cloud hung hovering o'er their head. Livid it looked, the threatening of a storm. Then night and horror, ocean's face deformed. The pilot, Palinurus, cried aloud, What gusts of weather from that gathering cloud my thoughts presage! Ere yet the tempest roars, stand to your tackle, mates, and stretch your oars. Contract your swelling sails, and luff to wind. The frighted crew performed the task assigned. Then to his fearless chief, Not Heaven, said he, though Jove himself should promise Italy, can stem the torrent of this raging sea. Mark how the shifting winds from west arise, and what collected night involves the skies. Nor can our shaken vessels live at sea, much less against the tempest force their way. 'Tis fate diverts our course, and fate we must obey. Not far from hence, if I observed aright the southing of the stars and polar light, Sicilia lies, whose hospitable shores in safety we may reach with struggling oars. Aeneas then replied, Too sure I find we strive in vain against the seas and wind. Now shift your sails. What place can please me more than what you promise, the Sicilian shore, whose hallow'd earth Anchises' bone contains, and where a prince of Trojan lineage reigns. The course resolved, before the western wind, they scud amain, and make the port a sign. Meanwhile Acestes from a lofty stand beheld the fleet descending on the land, and, not unmindful of his ancient race, down from the cliff he ran with eager pace, and held the hero in a strict embrace. Of a rough Libyan bear the spoils he wore, and either hand a pointed jav'lin bore. His mother was a dame of Dardan blood, his sire Crinisus, a Sicilian flood. He welcomes his returning friends ashore, with plenteous country cates and homely store. Now, when the following morn had chased away the flying stars, and light restored the day, Aeneas call'd the Trojan troops around, and thus bespoke them from a rising ground: "Offspring of heav'n, divine Dardanian race, the sun revolving thro' th' ethereal space, the shining circle of the year has fill'd, since first this isle my father's ashes held. And now the rising day renews the year, a day for ever sad, for ever dear. This would I celebrate with annual games, with gifts on altars piled, and holy flames, Tho' banish'd to gay Tulia's barren sands, Caught on the Grecian seas, or hostile lands. But since this happy storm our fleet has driven, Not, as I deem, without the will of Heav'n, Upon these friendly shores and flow'ry plains, Which hide Anchises and his blest remains, let us with joy perform his honours due, and pray for prosperous winds our voyage to renew. Pray that in towns and temples of our own the name of great Anchises may be known, and yearly games may spread the gods' renown. Our sports, Acestes, of the Trojan race, With royal gifts ordain'd is pleas'd to grace. 2 steers on every ship the king bestows; His gods and ours shall share your equal vows. Besides, if, 9 days hence, the rosy morn Shall with unclouded light the skies adorn, That day with solemn sports I mean to grace. Light galleys on the seas shall run a wat'ry race. Some shall in swiftness for the gold contend, And others try the twanging bow to bend. The strong, with iron gauntlets arm'd, shall stand Oppos'd in combat on the yellow sand. Let all be present at the games prepar'd, And joyful victors wait the just reward. But now assist the rites with garlands crown." He said, and first his brows with myrtle bound; Then Helymus by his example led, And old Acestes each adorn'd his head. Thus young Ascanius with a sprightly grace His temples tied, and all the Trojan race. Aeneas then advanc'd amidst the train, By thousands follow'd thro' the fruitful plain, To great Anchises' tomb; which when he found, He pour'd to Bacchus on the hallow'd ground 2 bowls of sparkling wine, of milk 2 more, And 2 from offer'd bulls of purple gore. With roses then the sepulchre he strow'd, And thus his father's ghost he spoke aloud: "Hail, O ye holy mourners, hail again! Paternal ashes, now review'd in vain. The gods permitted not that you with me Should reach the promis'd shores of Italy, Or Tiber's flood, what flood soe'er it be." Scarce had he finish'd, when, with speckled pride, A serpent from the tomb began to glide. His hugy bulk on 7 high volumes roll'd; Blue was his breadth of back, but streak'd with gold. Thus, riding on his curls, he seem'd to pass A rolling fire along, and singe the grass. More various colours thro' his body run, Than Iris with her bow imbibes the sun. Betwixt the rising altars and around, The sacred monster shot along the ground. With harmless play amidst the bowls he pass'd, And with his lolling tongue essay'd the taste. Thus, fed with holy food, the wondrous guest Within the hollow tomb retir'd to rest. The pious prince, surpris'd at what he view'd, The funeral honours with more zeal renew'd, Doubtful if this the place's genius were, Or guardian of his father's sepulchre. 2 sheep, according to the rites he slew, As many swine and steers of sable hue, New generous wine he from the goblets pour'd, And call'd his father's ghost from hell restor'd. The glad attendants in long order come, Off'ring their gifts at great Anchises' tomb. Some add more oxen, some divide the spoil, Some place the chargers on the grassy soil, Some blow the fire, and offer'd entrails broil. Now came the day desir'd. The skies were bright with rosy lustre of the rising light. The bord'ring people, rous'd by sounding fame Of Trojan feasts and great Acestes' name, the crowded shore with acclamations fill, Part to behold, and part to prove their skill. And first the gifts in public view they place, Green laurel wreaths and palm, the victor's grace. Within the circle arms and tripods lie, Ingots of gold and silver heap'd on high, And vests embroider'd of the Tyrian dye. The trumpet's clangor then the feast proclaims, And all prepare for their appointed games. 4 galleys first with equal rowers bear, Advancing in the watery lists appear. The speedy dolphin that outstrips the wind bore Mnestheus, author of the Mamaean kind. Gyas the vast Chimaera's bulk commands, Which rising like a tow'ring city stands. 3 Trojans tug at every lab'ring oar, 3 banks in 3 degrees the sailors bore. Beneath their sturdy strokes the billows roar. Sergestus, who began the Sergian race, In the great Centaur took the leading place. Cloanthus on the sea-green Scylla stood, From whom Cluentius draws his Trojan blood. Far in the sea, against the foaming shore, There stands a rock; the raging billows roar Above his head in storms; but when 'tis clear, Uncurl their ridgy backs, and at his foot appear. In peace below the gentle waters run; The cormorants above lie basking in the sun. On this the hero fix'd an oak in sight, The mark to guide the mariners aright. To bear with this, the seamen stretch their oars, Then round the rock they steer, and seek the former shores. The lots decide their place. Above the rest, each leader shining in his Tyrian vest, The common crew, with wreaths of poplar boughs, Their temples crown, and shade their sweaty brows. Besmear'd with oil, their naked shoulders shine; All take their seats, and wait the sounding sign. They grip their oars, and every panting breast Is rais'd by turns by hope, by turns with fear depress'd. The clangor of the trumpet gives the sign. At once they start, advancing in a line. With shouts the sailors rend the starry skies; Lash'd with their oars, the smoky billows rise. Sparkles the briny main, and the vexed ocean fries. Exact in time, with equal strokes they row. At once the brushing oars and brazen prow Dash up the sandy waves, and ope the depths below. Not fiery coursers in a chariot race Invade the field with half so swift a pace; Nor the fierce driver with more fury lends The sounding lash, and ere the stroke descends, Low to the wheels his pliant body bends. The partial crowd their hopes and fears divide, And aid with eager shouts the favour'd side. Cries, murmurs, clamours, with a mixing sound, From woods to woods, from hills to hills rebound. Amidst the loud applauses of the shore, Gyas outstripp'd the rest, and sprung before. Cloanthus, better mann'd, pursued him fast, But his o'er-masted galley check'd his haste. The Centaur and the Dolphin brush'd the brine With equal oars, advancing in a line. And now the mighty Centaur seems to lead, and now the speedy Dolphin gets ahead. Now board to board the rival vessels row, the billows lave the skies, and ocean groans below. They reach the mark. Proud Gyas and his train in triumph rode, the victors of the main. But, steering round, he charg'd his pilot stand more close to shore, and skim along the sand. Let others bear to sea. Menoetes heard, but secret shelves too cautiously he fear'd, and fearing sought the deep, and still aloof he steer'd. With louder cries the captain call'd again, "Bear to the rocky shore, and shun the main." He spoke, and speaking, at his stern he saw the bold Cloanthus near the shelvings draw. Betwixt the mark and him the Scylla stood, and in a closer compass plow'd the flood. He pass'd the mark, and wheeling got before. Gyas blasphem'd the gods, devotedly swore, Cried out for anger, and his hair he tore. Mindless of others' lives, so high was grown His rising rage, and careless of his own, The trembling dotard to the deck he drew, Then hoisted up, and overboard he threw. This done, he seiz'd the helm, his fellows cheer'd, Turn'd short upon the shelves, and madly steer'd. Hardly his head the plunging pilot rears, Clogg'd with his clothes, and cumber'd with his years. Now, dripping wet, he climbs the cliff with pain. The crowd, that saw him fall and float again, Shout from the distant shore, and loudly laugh To see his heaving breast disgorge the briny draught. The following Centaur and the Dolphin's crew Their vanish'd hopes of victory renew. While Gyas lags, they kindle in the race. To reach the mark, Sergestus takes the place. Mnestheus pursues, and while around they wind, Comes up, not half his galley's length behind. Then on the deck amidst his mates appear'd, And thus their drooping courage he cheer'd: "My friends, and Hector's followers heretofore, Exert your vigour, tug the lab'ring oar. Stretch to your strokes, my still unconquer'd crew, Whom from the flaming walls of Troy I drew. In this our common interest let me find That strength of hand, that courage of the mind, As when you stemm'd the strong Malean flood, And o'er the Syrtes' broken billows row'd. I seek not now the foremost palm to gain, Tho' yet, but that haughty wish is vain. Let those enjoy it whom the gods ordain. But, to be last, the lags of all the race, Redeem yourselves and me from that disgrace." Now, one and all, they lug amain, They row at the full stretch, and shake the brazen prow. The sea beneath them sinks, their lab'ring sides Are swell'd, and sweat runs guttering down in tides. Chance aids their daring with unhop'd success. Sergestus, eager with his beak to press Betwixt the rival galley and the rock, Shuts up th' unwieldy Centaur in the lock. The vessel struck, and with the dreadful shock Her oars she shiver'd, and her head she broke. The trembling rowers from their banks arise, And anxious for themselves renounce the prize. With iron poles they heave her off the shores, And gather from the sea their floating oars. The crew of Mnestheus, with elated minds, Urge their success, and call the willing winds. Then ply their oars, and cut their liquid way In larger compass on the roomy sea. As, when the dove her rocky hole forsakes, Rous'd in a fright, her sounding rings she shakes. The cavern rings with clattering, out she flies, And leaves her callow care, and cleaves the skies. At first she flutters, but at length she springs To smoother flight, and shoots upon her wings. So Mnestheus in the Dolphin cuts the sea, And flying with a force, that force assists his way. Sergestus in the Centaur soon he pass'd, Wedged in the rocky shoals, and sticking fast. In vain the victor he with cries implores, And practices to row with shatter'd oars. Then Mnestheus bears with Gyas, and outflies. The ship, without a pilot, yields the prize. Unvanquish'd Scylla now alone remains; Her he pursues, and all his vigour strains. Shouts from the fav'ring multitude arise; Applauding Echo to the shouts replies. Shouts, wishes, and applause run rattling thro' the skies. These clamours with disdain the Scylla heard, Much grudg'd the praise, but more the robb'd reward. Resolv'd to hold their own, they mend their pace, All obstinate to die, or gain the race. Rais'd with success, the Dolphins swiftly ran, For they can conquer who believe they can. Both urge their oars, and fortune both supplies, And both perhaps had shar'd an equal prize, When to the seas Cloanthus holds his hands, And succour from the watery powers demands. Gods of the liquid realms on which I row, If, given by you, the laurel bind my brow, assist to make me guilty of my vow. A snow-white bull shall on your shore be slain, His offer'd entrails cast into the main, And ruddy wine from golden goblets thrown Your grateful gift and my return shall own. The choir of nymphs, and Phorcus from below, With virgin Panopia heard this vow; And old Portunus, with his breadth of hand, Push'd on, and sped the galley to the land. Swift as a shaft, or winged wing, she flies, And darting to the port, obtains the prize. The herald summons all, and then proclaims Cloanthus conqueror of the naval games. The prince with laurel crowns the victor's head, And 3 fat steers are to his vessel led, The ship's reward; with generous wine beside, And sums of silver, which the crew divide. The leaders are distinguish'd from the rest; The victor honour'd with a nobler vest, Where gold and purple strive in equal rows, And needlework its happy cost bestows. There Ganymede is wrought with living art, Chasing thro' Ida's groves the trembling hart. Breathless he seems, yet eager to pursue, When from aloft descends in open view The bird of Jove, and, sousing on his prey, With crooked talons bears the boy away. In vain, with lifted hands and gazing eyes, His guards behold him soaring thro' the skies, And dogs pursue his flight with imitated cry. Mnestheus the second victor was declar'd, And summon'd there the second prize he shar'd. A coat of mail, which brave Demoleus bore, More brave Aeneas from his shoulders tore, In single combat on the Trojan shore. This was ordain'd for Mnestheus to possess, In war for his defence, for ornament in peace. Rich was the gift, and glorious to behold, But yet so ponderous with its plates of gold, That scarce 2 servants could the weight sustain. Yet, loaded thus, Demoleus o'er the plain Pursued, and lightly seiz'd the Trojan train. The third, succeeding to the last reward, 2 goodly bowls of massy silver shar'd, With figures prominent and richly wrought, And 2 brass caldrons from Dodona brought. Thus all, rewarded by the hero's hands, Their conquering temples bound with purple bands. And now Sergestus, clearing from the rock, Brought back his galley shatter'd with the shock. Forlorn she look'd without an aiding oar, And, hooted by the vulgar, made to shore. As when a snake, surpris'd upon the road, Is crush'd athwart her body by the load Of heavy wheels, or with a mortal wound Her belly bruis'd, and trodden to the ground, In vain with loosen'd curls she crawls along, Yet fierce above she brandishes her tongue, Glares with her eyes, and bristles with her scales; But, grovelling in the dust, her parts unsound she trails. So slowly to the port the Centaur tends, But what she wants in oars with sails amends. Yet, for his galley sav'd, the grateful prince Is pleas'd th' unhappy chief to recompense. Pholoe, the Cretan slave, rewards his care, Beauteous herself, with lovely twins as fair. From thence his way the Trojan hero bent Into the neighb'ring plain, with mountains pent, Whose sides were shaded with surrounding wood. Full in the midst of this fair valley stood A native theatre, which, rising slow By just degrees, o'erlook'd the ground below. High on a sylvan throne the leader sate; A numerous train attend in solemn state. Here those that in the rapid course delight, Desire of honour, and the prize invite. The rival runners without order stand, The Trojans mix'd with the Sicilian band. First Nisus with Euryalus appears, Euryalus a boy of blooming years, With sprightly grace and equal beauty crown'd. Nisus for friendship to the youth renown'd. Diores next, of Priam's royal race; Then Salius join'd with Patron took their place. But Patron in Arcadia had his birth, And Salius his from Acarnanian earth. When two Sicilian youths, the names of those Swift Helymus and lovely Panopes, Both jolly huntsmen, both in forest bred, And owning all Acestes for the head, And several others of ignobler name, Whom time has not deliver'd o'er to fame. To these the hero thus his thoughts explain'd, In words which general approbation gain'd. One common largess is for all design'd, The vanquish'd and the victor shall be join'd. 2 darts of polish'd steel and Gnosian wood, A silver-studded axe alike bestow'd. The foremost 3 have olive wreaths decreed. The first of these obtains a stately steed, Adorn'd with trappings, and the next in fame The quiver of an Amazonian dame, With feather'd Thracian arrows well supplied. A golden belt shall gird his manly side, Which with a sparkling diamond shall be tied. The third this Grecian helmet shall content, he said. To their appointed base they went. With beating hearts the expected sign receiv'd, And starting all at once, the barrier leave. Spread out as on the winged winds they flew, And seiz'd the distant goal with greedy view. Shot from the crowd, swift Nisus all o'erpass'd, Nor storms nor thunder equal half his haste. The next, but though the next yet far disjoin'd, Came Salius, and Euryalus behind. Then Helymus, who young Diores plied, Step after step, and almost side by side, His shoulders pressing, and in longer space Had won, or left at least a dubious race. Now spent, the goal they almost reach at last, When eager Nisus, hapless in his haste, Slipp'd first, and slipping fell upon the plain, Soak'd with the blood of oxen newly slain. The careless victor had not mark'd his way, But treading where the treacherous puddle lay, His heels flew up, and on the grassy floor He fell, besmear'd with filth and holy gore. Not mindless then, Euryalus, of thee, Nor of the sacred bonds of amity, He strove th' immediate rival's hope to cross, And caught the foot of Salius as he rose. So Salius lay extended on the plain. Euryalus springs out the prize to gain, and leaves the crowd. Applauding peals attend the victor to his goal, who vanquished by his friend. Next Helymus, then Diores came, by two misfortunes made the third in fame. But Salius enters, and exclaiming loud for justice, deafens and disturbs the crowd, urges his cause may in the court be heard, and pleads the prize is wrongfully conferred. But favour for Euryalus appears, his blooming beauty with his tender years had bribed the judges for the promised prize. Besides, Diores fills the court with cries, who vainly reaches at the last reward, if the first palm on Salius be conferred. Then thus the prince: let no disputes arise, where fortune placed it, I award the prize. But fortune's errors give me leave to mend, at least to pity my deserving friend, he said. And from among the spoils he draws, ponderous with shaggy mane and golden paws, a lion's hide. To Salius this he gives. Nisus with envy sees the gift and grieves. If such rewards to vanquished men are due, he said, and falling is to rise by you, what prize may Nisus from your bounty claim, who merited first rewards and fame? In falling both an equal fortune tried, would fortune for my fall so well provide. With this he pointed to his face, and showed his hand, and all his habit smeared with blood. The indulgent father of the people smiled, and caused to be produced an ample shield of wondrous art. But Didymaon wrought, long since from Neptune's bars in triumph brought. This, given to Nisus, he divides the rest, and equal justice in his gifts expressed. The race thus ended, and rewards bestowed, once more the prince bespeaks the attentive crowd. If there be here whose dauntless courage dare in gauntlet fight with limbs and body bare, his opposite sustain in open view, stand forth the champion, and the games renew. Two prizes I propose, and thus divide: a bull with gilded horns and fillets tied shall be the portion of the conquering chief. A sword and helm shall cheer the loser's grief. Then haughty Dares in the lists appears. Stalking he strides, his head erected bears. His nervous arms the weighty gauntlet wield, and loud applauses echo through the field. Dares alone in combat used to stand, the match of mighty Paris, hand to hand. The same at Hector's funerals undertook gigantic Butes of the Amycian stock, and by the stroke of his resistless hand stretched the vast bulk upon the yellow sand. Such Dares was, and such he strode along, and drew the wonder of the gazing throng. His brawny back and ample breast he shows, his lifted arms around his head he throws, and deals in whistling air his empty blows. His match is sought, but through the trembling band not one dares answer to the proud demand. Presuming of his force with sparkling eyes, already he devours the promised prize. He claims the bull with aweless insolence, and having seized his horns, accosts the prince. If none my matchless valour dares oppose, how long shall Dares wait his dastard foes? Permit me, chief, permit without delay, to lead this uncontested gift away. The crowd assents, and with redoubled cries, for the proud challenger demands the prize. End of Book 5, Part 1. Book 5, Games and a Conflagration, Part 2. Acestes, fired with just disdain, to see the palm usurped without a victory, reproach'd Entellus thus, who sate beside, and heard and saw, unmov'd, the Trojans' pride. Once, but in vain, a champion of renown, so tamely can you bear the ravish'd crown. A prize in triumph borne before your sight, and shun for fear the danger of the fight? Where is our Eryx now, the boasted name, the god who taught your thund'ring arm the game? Where now your baffled honour? Where the spoil that fill'd your house, and fame that fill'd our isle? Entellus thus: My soul is still the same, unmov'd with fear, and mov'd with martial fame. But my chill blood is curdled in my veins, and scarce the shadow of a man remains. O, could I turn to that fair prime again, that prime of which this boaster is so vain! The brave, who this decrepit age defies, should feel my force without the promis'd prize. He said, and rising at the word, he threw 2 ponderous gauntlets down in open view; gauntlets which Eryx, wont in fight to wield, and sheath'd his hand with in the listed field. With fear and wonder seiz'd the crowd beholds the gloves of death, with 7 distinguish'd folds of tough bull hides. The space within is spread with iron, or with loads of heavy lead. Dares himself was daunted at the sight, renounced his challenge, and refused to fight. Astonish'd at their weight, the hero stands, and poised the pond'rous engines in his hands. What had your wonder, said Entellus, been, had you the gauntlets of Alcides seen, or view'd the stern debate on this unhappy green? These which I bear your brother Eryx bore, still mark'd with batter'd brains and mingled gore. With these he long sustain'd the Herculean arm, and these I wielded while my blood was warm. This languag'd frame, while better spirits fed, ere age unstrung my nerves, or time o'ersnow'd my head. But if the challenger these arms refuse, and cannot wield their weight, or dare not use; if great Aeneas and Acestes join in his request, these gauntlets I resign. Let us with equal arms perform the fight, and let him leave to fare, since I resign my right. This said, Entellus for the strife prepares. Stripp'd of his quilted coat, his body bears. Composed of mighty bones and brawn he stands, a goodly tow'ring object on the sands. Then just Aeneas equal arms supplied, which round their shoulders to their wrists they tied. Both on the tiptoe stand at full extent, their arms aloft, their bodies inly bent. Their heads from aiming blows they bear afar, with clashing gauntlets then provoke the war. One on his youth and pliant limbs relies, one on his sinews and his giant size. The last is still with age, his motion slow. He heaves for breath, he staggers to and fro, and clouds of issuing smoke his nostrils loudly blow. Yet, equal in success, they ward, they strike. Their ways are different, but their art alike. Before, behind, the blows are dealt. Around their hollow sides the rattling thumps resound. A storm of strokes, well meant, with fury flies, and errs about their temples, ears, and eyes. Nor always errs, for oft the gauntlet draws a sweeping stroke along the crackling jaws, heavy with age. Entellus stands his ground, but with his warping body wards the wound. His hand and watchful eye keep even pace. while Dares traverses and shifts his place, and, like a captain who beleaguers round some strong-built castle on a rising ground, views all th' approaches with observing eyes, this and that other part in vain he tries, and more on industry than force relies. With hands on high, Entellus threats the foe, but Dares watch'd the motion from below, and slipp'd aside, and shunn'd the long descending blow. Entellus wastes his forces on the wind, and thus deluded of the stroke design'd, headlong and heavy fell; his ample breast and weighty limbs his ancient mother press'd. So falls a hollow pine that long had stood on Ida's height, or Erymanthus' wood, torn from the roots. The diff'ring nations rise, and shouts and mingled murmurs rend the skies. Acestus runs with eager haste to raise the fallen companion of his youthful days. Dauntless he rose, and to the fight return'd; with shame his glowing cheeks, his eyes with fury burn'd. Disdain and conscious virtue fir'd his breast, and with redoubled force his foe he press'd. He lays on load with either hand amain, and headlong drives the Trojan o'er the plain, nor stops, nor stays, nor rest, nor breath allows, but storm of stroke descend about his brows, a rattling tempest and a hail of blows. But now the prince, who saw the wild increase of wounds, commands the combatants to cease, and bounds Entellus' wrath, and bids the peace. First to the Trojans, spent with toil, he came, and sooth'd his sorrow for the suffer'd shame. "What fury seiz'd my friend?" "The gods," said he, "to him propitious, and averse to thee, have giv'n his arms superior force to thine. 'Tis madness to contend with strength divine." The gauntlet fight thus ended, from the shore His faithful friends unhappy Dares bore. His mouth and nostrils pour'd a purple flood, and pounded teeth came rushing with his blood. Faintly he stagger'd thro' the hissing throng, and hung his head, and trail'd his legs along. The sword and casque are carried by his train, but with his foe the palm and ox remain. The champion then before Aeneas came, proud of his prize, but prouder of his fame. "O goddess born, and you, Dardanian host, mark with attention, and forgive my boast. Learn what I was, by what remains, and know from what impending fate you sav'd my foe." Sternly he spoke, and then confronts the bull, and, on his ample forehead aiming full, the deadly stroke descending pierc'd the skull. Down drops the beast, nor needs a second wound, but sprawls in pangs of death, and spurns the ground. Then thus: "In Dares' stead I offer this: Eryx, accept a noble sacrifice. Take the last gift my weather'd arms can yield; Thy gauntlets I resign, and here renounce the field." This done, Aeneas orders, for the close, The strife of archers with contending bows. The mast Sergestus' shatter'd galley bore, With his own hands he raises on the shore. A fluttering dove upon the top they tie, The living mark at which their arrows fly. The rival archers in a line advance, Their turn of shooting to receive from chance. A helmet holds their names, the lots are drawn. On the first scroll was read Hippocoon. The people shout. Upon the next was found young Mnestheus, late with naval honours crown'd. The third contain'd Eurytion's noble name, Thy brother Pandarus, and next in fame, whom Pallas urg'd the treaty to confound, and send among the gifts a feather'd wound. Acestes in the bottom last remain'd, whom not his age from youthful sports restrain. Soon all with vigour bend their trusty bows, and from the quiver each his arrow chose. Hippocoon's was the first; with forceful sway It flew, and whizzing cut the liquid way. Fix'd in the mast, the feather'd weapon stands. The fearful pigeon flutters in her bands, and the tree trembled, and the shouting cries of the pleas'd people rend the vaulted skies. Then Mnestheus to the head his arrow drove, with lifted eyes, and took his aim above, but made a glancing shot, and miss'd the dove, yet miss'd so narrow that he cut the cord which fasten'd by the foot the flitting bird. The captive thus releas'd, away she flies, and beats with clapping wings the yielding skies. His bow already bent, Ereuthyon stood, and having first invok'd his brother god, his winged shaft with eager haste he sped. The fatal message reach'd her as she fled. She leaves her life aloft, she strikes the ground, and renders back the weapon in the wound. Acestes, grudging at his lot, remains without a prize to gratify his pains; yet, shooting upward, sends his shaft, to show an archer's art, and boast his twanging bow. The feather'd arrow gave a dire portent, and later augurs judge from this event. Chaf'd by the speed, it fir'd, and as it flew, a trail of following flames ascending drew. Kindling they mount, and mark the shiny way Across the skies, as falling meteors play, and vanish into wind, or in a blaze decay. The Trojans and Sicilians wildly stare, and trembling turn their wonder into pray'r. The Dardan prince put on a smiling face, and strain'd Acestes with a close embrace. Then, honouring him with gifts above the rest, Turn'd the bad omen, nor his fears confess'd. "The gods," said he, "this miracle have wrought, And order'd you the prize without the lot. Accept this goblet, rough with figur'd gold, Which Thracian Cisseus gave my sire of old. This pledge of ancient amity receive, Which to my second sire I justly give." He said, and, with the trumpet's cheerful sound, Proclaim'd him victor, and with laurel crown'd. Nor good Eurytion envied him the prize, Tho' he transfix'd the pigeon in the sky. Who cut the line, with second gifts was grac'd; The third was his whose arrow pierc'd the mast. The chief, before the games were wholly done, Call'd Periphantes, tutor to his son, And whisper'd thus: "With speed Ascanius find, And if his childish troop be ready join'd, On horseback let him grace his grandsire's day, And lead his equals arm'd in just array." He said, and calling out, the cirque he clears. The crowd withdrawn, an open plain appears. And now the noble youths, of form divine, Advance before their fathers in a line. The riders grace the steeds with glory shine. Thus, marching on in military pride, Shouts of applause resound from side to side. Their casques adorn'd with laurel wreaths they wear, Each brandishing aloft a cornel spear. Some at their backs their gilded quivers bore, Their chains of burnish'd gold hung down before. 3 graceful troops they form'd upon the green, 3 graceful leaders at their head were seen. 12 follow'd every chief, and left a space between. The first young Priam led, a lovely boy, Whose grandsire was th' unhappy king of Troy. His race in after times was known to fame, New honours adding to the Latian name. And well the royal boy his Thracian steed became, White were the fetlocks of his feet before, and on his front a snowy star he bore. Then beauteous Attis, with Iülus bred, of equal age, the second squadron led. The last in order, but the first in place, first in the lovely features of his face, rode fair Ascanius on a fiery steed, Queen Dido's gift, and of the Tyrian breed. Sure coursers for the rest the king ordains, with golden bits adorned and purple reins. The pleased spectators peals of shouts renew, and all the parents in the children view them, make their motions, and their sprightly grace, and hopes and fears alternate in their face. The unfledged commanders and their martial train first make the circuit of the sandy plain, around their sires, and at the appointed sign, drawn up in beauteous order, form a line. The second signal sounds, the troop divides in 3 distinguish'd parts, with 3 distinguish'd guides. Again they close, and once again disjoin. In troop to troop opposed, and line to line, they meet, they wheel, they throw their darts afar, with harmless rage and well-dissembled war. Then in a round the mingled bodies run, flying they follow, and pursuing shun. Broken they break, and rallying they renew, in other forms the military shew. At last in order undiscern'd they join, and march together in a friendly line. And, as the Cretan labyrinth of old, with wandering ways and many a winding fold, involved the weary feet without redress in a round error which denied recess, so fought the Trojan boys in warlike play, turn'd and return'd, and still a different way. Thus dolphins in the deep each other chase in circles, when they swim around the watery race. This game, these carousels, Ascanius taught, and building Alba to the Latins brought. Shew'd what he learn'd, the Latin sires impart to their succeeding sons the graceful art. From these imperial Rome receiv'd the game, which Troy, the youths, the Trojan troop, they name. Thus far the sacred sports they celebrate, but Fortune soon resum'd her ancient hate. For while they pay their dead his annual dues, those envied rites Saturnian Juno views, and sends the goddess of the various bow to try new methods of revenge below. Supplies the winds to wing her airy way, where in the port secure the navy lay. Swiftly fair Iris down her arch descends, and undiscern'd her fatal voyage ends. She saw the gathering crowd, and gliding thence, the desert shore and fleet without defence. The Trojan matrons on the sands alone, with sighs and tears Anchises' death bemoan. Then turning to the sea their weeping eyes, their pity to themselves renews their cries. "Alas!" said one, "what oceans yet remain For us to sail, what labours to sustain!" All take the word, and, with a general groan, Implore the gods for peace and places of their own. The goddess, great in mischief, views their pains, And in a woman's form her heav'nly limbs restrains. In face and shape old Beroe she becomes, Doryclus' wife, a venerable dame, Once bless'd with riches and a mother's name. Thus chang'd, amidst the crying crowd she ran, Mix'd with the matrons, and these words began: "O wretched we, whom not the Grecian pow'r Nor flames destroy'd in Troy's unhappy hour! O wretched we, reserv'd by cruel fate Beyond the ruins of the sinking state! Now 7 revolving years are wholly run since this improsperous voyage we begun. Since, toss'd from shores to shores, from lands to lands, inhospitable rocks and barren sands, wand'ring in exile thro' the stormy sea, we search in vain for flying Italy. Now, cast by fortune on this kindred land, what should our rest and rising walls withstand, or hinder here to fix our banish'd band? O country lost, and gods redeem'd in vain, If still in endless exile we remain! Shall we no more the Trojan walls renew, Or streams of some dissembled Simois view? Haste, join with me, th' unhappy fleet consume! Cassandra bids, and I declare her doom. In sleep I saw her, she supplied my hands. For this I more than dreamt, with flaming brands. With these, said she, these wand'ring ships destroy. These are your fatal seats, and this your Troy. Time calls you now, the precious hour employ. Slack not the good presage, while heav'n inspires Our minds to dare, and gives the ready fires. See, Neptune's altars minister their brands. The god is pleas'd, the god supplies our hands. And from the pile a flaming fire she drew, And, toss'd in air, amidst the galleys threw. Wrapp'd in amaze, the matrons wildly stare. Then Pyrgo reverenced for her hoary hair, Pyrgo, the nurse of Priam's num'rous race. No Beroe this, though she belies her face. What terrors from her frowning front arise! Behold a goddess in her ardent eyes! What rays around her heav'nly face are seen! Mark her majestic voice, and more than mortal mien. Beroe but now I left, whom pin'd with pain Her age and anguish from these rites detain. She said. The matrons, seiz'd with new amaze, Roll their malignant eyes, and on the navy gaze. They fear and hope, and neither part obey. They hope the fated land, but fear the fatal way. The goddess, having done her task below, Mounts up on equal wings, and bends the painted bow. Struck with the sight, and seiz'd with rage divine, The matrons prosecute their mad design. They shriek aloud, they snatch with impious hands The food of altars, fires, and flaming brands. Green boughs and saplings mingled in their haste, And smoking torches on the ships they cast. The flame, unstopp'd at first, more fury gains, And Vulcan rides at large with loosen'd reins. Triumphant to the painted sterns he soars, And seizes in this way the banks and crackling oars. Eumelus was the first the news to bear, While yet they crowd the rural theatre. Then what they hear is witness'd by their eyes. A storm of sparkles and of flames arise. Ascanius took the alarm, while yet he led His Earley warriors on his prancing steed, And, spurring on, his equal soon o'erpass'd. Nor could his frighted friends reclaim his haste. Soon as the royal youth appear'd in view, He sent his voice before him as he flew. What madness moves you, matrons, to destroy The last remainders of unhappy Troy? Not hostile fleets, but your own hopes you burn, And on your friends your fatal fury turn. Behold your own Ascanius. While he said, he drew his glittering helmet from his head, In which the youths to sportful arms he led. By this Aeneas and his train appear, And now the women, seiz'd with shame and fear, Dispers'd, to woods and cavern take their flight, Abhor their actions, and avoid the light. Their friends acknowledge, and their error find, And shake the goddess from their alter'd mind. Not so the raging fires their fury cease, But, lurking in the seams, with seeming peace Work on their way amidst the smouldering tow, Sure in destruction, but in motion slow. The silent plague thro' the green timber eats, And vomits out a tardy flame by fits. Down to the keels and upward to the sails The fire descends, or mounts, but still prevails. Nor buckets pour'd, nor strength of human hand, Can the victorious element withstand. The pious hero rends his robe, and throws to heav'ns his hand, And with his friends his vows. "O Jove," he cried, "if pray'rs can yet have place, If thou abhorrest not all the Dardan race, If any spark of pity still remain, If gods are gods, and not invoked in vain, Yet spare the relics of the Trojan train, Yet from the flames our burning vessels free, Or let thy fury fall alone on me. At this devoted head thy thunder throw, And send the willing sacrifice below." Scarce had he said, when southern storms arise; From pole to pole the forky lightning flies. Loud rattling shakes the mountains and the plain; Heav'n bellies downward, and descends in rain; Whole sheets of water from the clouds are sent, Which, hissing thro' the planks, the flames prevent, And stop the fiery pest. 4 ships alone Burnt to the waist, and for the fleet atone. But doubtful thoughts the hero's heart divide, If he should still in Sicily reside, Forgetful of his fates, or tempt the main, In hope the promis'd Italy to gain. Then Notes, old and wise, to whom alone The will of Heav'n by Pallas was foreshown, Vers'd in portents, experienced and inspir'd, To tell events, and what the fates requir'd. Thus, while he stood, to neither part inclin'd, With cheerful words reliev'd his lab'ring mind. "O goddess born, resign'd in ev'ry state, With patience bear, with prudence push your fate. By suffering well our fortune we subdue, Fly when she frowns, and, when she calls, pursue. Your friend Acestes is of Trojan kind; To him disclose the secrets of your mind. Trust in his hands your old and useless train, Too numerous for the ships which yet remain. The feeble, old, indulgent of their ease, The dames who dread the dangers of the seas, With all the dastard crew who dare not stand The shock of battle with your foes by land. Here you may build a common town for all, And from Acestes' name Acesta call." The reasons, with his friend's experience join'd, Encourag'd much, but more disturb'd his mind. 'Twas dead of night, when to his slumb'ring eyes His father's shade descended from the skies, And thus he spoke: "O more than vital breath, Lov'd while I liv'd, and dear even after death! O son, in various toils and troubles toss'd, The King of Heav'n employs my careful ghost On his command; the god, who sav'd from fire Your flaming fleet, and heard your just desire, The wholesome counsel of your friend receive, And here the coward train and women leave. The chosen youth, and those who nobly dare, Transport, to tempt the dangers of the war. The stern Italians will their courage try; Rough are their manners, and their minds are high. But first to Pluto's palace you shall go, And seek my shade among the blest below. For not with impious ghosts my soul remains, Nor suffer'd with the damn'd perpetual pains, But breathes the living air of soft Elysian plains. The chaste Sibylla shall your steps convey, And blood of offer'd victims free the way. There shall you know what realms the gods assign, And learn the fates and fortunes of your line. But now, farewell! I vanish with the night, and feel the blast of heav'n's approaching light," he said, and mix'd with shades, and took his airy flight. "Whither so fast?" the filial duty cried, "And why, ah why, the wish'd embrace denied?" He said, and rose, as holy zeal inspires, He rakes hot embers, and renews the fires. His country gods and Vesta then adores With cakes and incense, and their aid implores. Next for his friends and royal host he sent, Reveal'd his vision, and the gods' intent, With his own purpose. All, without delay, The will of Jove and his desires obey. They list with woman each degenerate name, Who dares not hazard life for future fame. These they cashier; the brave remaining few, Oars, banks, and cables half consum'd, renew. The prince designs a city with the plow; The lots their sev'ral tenements allow. This part is nam'd from Ilium, that from Troy, And the new king ascends the throne with joy. A chosen senate from the people draws, Appoints the judges, and ordains the laws. Then on the top of Eryx they begin A rising temple to the Paphian queen. Anchises last is honour'd as a god. A priest is added, annual gifts bestow'd, And groves are planted round his blest abode. 9 days they pass in feasts, their temples crown'd, And fumes of incense in the fanes abound. Then from the south arose a gentle breeze, That curl'd the smoothness of the glassy sea. The rising winds a ruffling gale afford, And call the merry mariners aboard. Now loud laments along the shores resound, Of parting friends in close embraces bound. The trembling women, the degenerate train, Who shun the frightful dangers of the main, Even those desire to sail and take their share Of the rough passage and the promis'd war; Whom good Aeneas cheers, and recommends To their new master's care his fearful friends. On Eryx' altar 3 fat calves he lays, A lamb new fallen to the stormy seas. Then slips his hawsers, and his anchors weighs. High on the deck the godlike hero stands, With olive crown'd, a charger in his hands. Then cast the reeking entrails in the brine, And pour'd the sacrifice of purple wine. Fresh gales arise, with equal strokes they vie, And brush the buxom seas, and o'er the billows fly. Meantime the mother goddess, full of fears, To Neptune thus address'd with tender tears: "The pride of Jove's imperious queen, the rage, The malice which no suff'rings can assuage, Compel me to these pray'rs, since neither fate, Nor time, nor pity, can remove her hate. E'en Jove is thwarted by his haughty wife; Still vanquish'd, yet she renews the strife. As if 'twere little to consume the town Which awed the world, and wore th' imperial crown, She prosecutes the ghost of Troy with pains, And gnaws even to the bones the last remains. Let her the causes of her hatred tell, But you can witness its effects too well. You saw the storm she rais'd on Libyan floods, That mix'd the mounting billows with the clouds; When, bribing Aeolus, she shook the main, And mov'd rebellion in your watery reign. With fury she possess'd the Dardan dames, To burn their fleet with execrable flames; And forc'd Aeneas, when his ships were lost, To leave his followers on a foreign coast. For what remains, your godhead I implore, And trust my son to your protecting pow'r. If neither Jove nor fate's decree withstand, Secure this passage to the Latian land." Then thus the mighty ruler of the main: "What may not Venus hope from Neptune's reign? My kingdom claims your birth; my late defence Of your endanger'd fleet may claim your confidence. Nor less by land than sea my deeds declare How much your lov'd Aeneas is my care. Thee, Xanthus, and thee, Simois, I attest, Your Trojan troops, when proud Achilles press'd, And drove before him headlong on the plain, And dash'd against the walls the trembling train; When floods were fill'd with bodies of the slain; When crimson Xanthus, doubtful of its way, Stood up on ridges to behold the sea; New heaps came tumbling in, and chok'd his way; When your Aeneas fought, but fought with odds Of force unequal, and unequal gods. I spread a cloud before the victor's sight, Sustain'd the vanquish'd, and secur'd his flight. Even then secur'd him, when I sought with joy The vow'd destruction of ungrateful Troy. My will's the same, fair goddess, fear no more; Your fleet shall safely gain the Latian shore. Their lives are given; one destin'd head alone Shall perish, and for the multitudes atone. Thus, having arm'd with hopes her anxious mind, His finny team Saturnian Neptune join'd; Then adds the foamy bridle to their jaws, And to the loosen'd reins permits the laws. High on the waves his azure car he guides; Its axles thunder, and the sea subsides, And the smooth ocean rolls her silent tides. The tempests fly before their father's face; Trains of inferior gods his triumph grace; And monster whales before their master play, And choirs of Tritons crowd the watery way. The marshal'd pow'rs in equal troops divide; To right and left the gods his better side enclose, And on the worse the nymphs and Nereids ride. Now smiling hope, with sweet vicissitude, Within the hero's mind his joys renew. He calls to raise the masts, the sheets display; The cheerful crew with diligence obey. They scud before the wind, and sail in open sea. Ahead of all the master pilot steers, And, as he leads, the following navy veers. The steeds of night had travell'd half the sky; The drowsy rowers on their benches lie; When the soft god of sleep with easy flight Descends, and draws behind a trail of light. Thou, Palinurus, art his destin'd prey; To thee alone he takes his fatal way. Dire dreams to thee and iron sleep he bears, And, lighting on the prow, the form of Phorbas wears. Then thus the traitor god began his tale: "The winds, my friend, inspire a pleasing gale; The ships, without thy care, securely sail. Now steal an hour of sweet repose, and I Will take the rudder, and thy room supply." To whom the yawning pilot, half asleep: "Me dost thou bid to trust the treacherous deep, The harlot smiles of her dissembling faith, And to her faith commit the Trojan race? Shall I believe the Siren South again, And, oft betray'd, not know the monster main?" He said; his fasten'd hands the rudder keep, And, fix'd on heav'n, his eyes repel invading sleep. The god was wroth, and at his temples threw A branch in Lethe dipp'd, and drunk with Stygian dew. The pilot, vanquish'd by the pow'r divine, Soon clos'd his swimming eyes, and lay supine. Scarce were his limbs extended at their length, The god, insulting with superior strength, Fell heavy on him, plung'd him in the sea, And with the stern the rudder tore away. Headlong he fell, and, struggling in the main, Cried out for helping hands, but cried in vain. The victor daemon mounts obscure in air, While the ship sails without the pilot's care. On Neptune's faith the floating fleet relies; But what the man forsook, the god supplies; and o'er the dangerous deep secure the navy flies, guides by the Sirens' cliffs a shelfy coast, long infamous for ships and sailors lost, and white with bones. Th' impetuous ocean roars, and rocks rebellow from the sounding shores. The watchful hero felt the knocks, and found the tossing vessel sail'd on shoaly ground. Sure of his pilot's loss, he takes himself the helm, and steers aloof, and shuns the shelf. Inly he griev'd, and groaning from the breast, deplor'd his death, and thus his pain express'd: "For faith repos'd on seas, and on the flatt'ring sky, thy naked corpse is doom'd on shores unknown to lie." End of Book 5.
Book 6. The World Below. Part 1. He said, and wept, then spread his sails before the winds, and reach'd at length the Cumaean shore. Their anchors dropp'd, his crew the vessels moor. They turn their heads to sea, their sterns to land, and greet with greedy joy th' Italian strand. Some strike from clashing flints their fiery seed, some gather sticks the kindled flames to feed, or search for hollow trees and fell the woods, or trace thro' valleys the discover'd floods. Thus, while their sev'ral charges they fulfil, the pious prince ascends the sacred hill, where Phoebus is ador'd, and seeks the shade which hides from sight his venerable maid. Deep in a cave the Sibyl makes abode, thence full of fate returns, and of the god. Thro' Trivia's grove they walk, and now behold, and enter now the temple roof'd with gold. Were Daedalus to fly the Cretan shore, his heavy limbs unjointed pinions bore, the first who sail'd in air. 'Tis sung by fame, to the Cumaean coast at length he came, and here alighting built this costly frame. Inscrib'd to Phoebus, here he hung on high the steerage of his wings that cut the sky, then o'er the lofty gate his art emboss'd, Androgeos' death, and off'rings to his ghost. 7 youths from Athens yearly sent, to meet the fate appointed by revengeful Crete. And next to those the dreadful urn was placed, in which the destined names by lots were cast. The mournful parents stand around in tears, and rising Crete against their shore appears. There too, in living sculpture might be seen the mad affection of the Cretan queen, then how she cheats her bellowing lover's eye, the rushing leap, the doubtful progeny. The lower part a beast, a man above, the monument of their polluted love. Not far from thence he graved the wondrous maze, 1,000 doors, 1,000 winding ways. Here dwells the monster, hid from human view, not to be found but by the faithful clue, till the kind artist, moved with pious grief, lent to the loving maid this last relief, and all those erring paths described so well, that Theseus conquered, and the monster fell. Here hapless Icarus had found his part, had not the father's grief restrained his art. He twice essay'd to cast his son in gold, twice from his hands he dropp'd the forming mould. All this with wondering eyes Aeneas view'd, each varying object his delight renew'd. Eager to read the rest, Achates came, and by his side the mad divining dame, the priestess of the god, Deiphobé her name. "Time suffers not," she said, "to feed your eyes with empty pleasures. Haste the sacrifice. 7 bullocks yet unyoked for Phoebus choose, and for Diana 7 unspotted ewes." This said, the servants urge the sacred rites, while to the temple she the prince invites. A spacious cave, within its farmost part, was hew'd and fashioned by laborious art. Thro' the hill's hollow sides before the place 100 doors, 100 entries grace. As many voices issue, and the sound of Sibyl's words as many times rebound. Now to the mouth they come, aloud she cries, "This is the time, enquire your destinies. He comes, behold the god!" Thus while she said, and shivering at this sacred entry stay'd, her colour changed, Her face was not the same, and hollow groans from her deep spirit came. Her hair stood up, convulsive rage possess'd her trembling limbs, and heav'd her labouring breast. Greater than humankind she seem'd to look, and with an accent more than mortal spoke. Her staring eyes with sparkling fury roll, when all the gods came rushing on her soul. Swiftly she turn'd, and foaming as she spoke, "Why this delay?" she cried, "the pow'rs invoke! Thy pray'rs alone can open this abode, else vain are my demands, and dumb the god." She said no more. The trembling Trojans hear, o'erspread with a damp sweat and holy fear. The prince himself, with awful dread possess'd, his vows to great Apollo thus address'd: "Indulgent god, propitious pow'r to Troy, swift to relieve, unwilling to destroy, directed by whose hand the Dardan dart pierc'd the proud Grecians' only mortal part, thus far, by fate's decrees and thy commands, thro' ambient seas and thro' devouring sands, our exil'd crew has sought th' Ausonian ground, and now, at length, the flying coast is found. Thus far the fate of Troy, from place to place, with fury has pursued her wand'ring race. Here cease, ye pow'rs, and let your vengeance end. Troy is no more, and can no more offend. And thou, O sacred maid, inspir'd to see th' event of things in dark futurity, give me what heav'n has promis'd to my fate, to conquer and command the Latian state, to fix my wand'ring gods, and find a place for the long exiles of the Trojan race. Then shall my grateful hands a temple rear to the twin gods with vows and solemn prayer, and annual rites, and festivals, and games shall be perform'd to their auspicious names. Nor shalt thou want thy honours in my land, for there thy faithful oracles shall stand preserv'd in shrines, and every sacred lay, which by thy mouth Apollo shall convey, all shall be treasur'd by a chosen train of holy priests, and ever shall remain. But, oh, commit not thy prophetic mind to flitting leaves, the sport of every wind, lest they disperse in air our empty fate. Write not, but, what the pow'rs ordain, relate." Struggling in vain, impatient of her load, and lab'ring underneath the ponderous god, the more she strove to shake him from her breast, with more and far superior force he press'd, commands his entrance, and, without control, usurps her organs, and inspires her soul. Now with a furious blast the 100 doors ope of themselves, a rushing whirlwind roars within the cave, and Sybil's voice restores: "Escaped the dangers of the wat'ry reign, yet more and greater ills by land remain. The coast, so long desir'd, nor doubt th' event, thy troops shall reach, but having reach'd, repent. Wars, horrid wars, I view, a field of blood, and Tiber rolling with a purple flood. Simois nor Xanthus shall be wanting there, a new Achilles shall in arms appear, and he too goddess born, fierce Juno's hate, added to hostile force, shall urge thy fate. To what strange nations shalt thou not resort, driv'n to solicit aid at every court? The cause the same which Ilium once oppress'd, a foreign mistress and a foreign guest. But thou, secure of soul, unbent with woes, the more thy fortune frowns, the more oppose. The dawnings of thy safety shall be shown, from whence thou least shalt hope, a Grecian town." Thus from the dark recess the Sibyl spoke, and the resisting air the thunder broke. The cave rebellow'd, and the temple shook. Th' ambiguous god who ruled her lab'ring breast, in these mysterious words his mind express'd. Some truth reveal'd, in terms involved the rest. At length her fury fell, her foaming ceas'd, and ebbing in her soul the god decreas'd. Then thus the chief: "No terror to my view, no frightful face of danger can be new. Inur'd to suffer, and resolv'd to dare, the fates without my pow'r shall be without my care. This let me crave, since near your grove the road to hell lies open, and the dark abode which Acheron surrounds, the navigable flood. Conduct me through the regions void of light, and lead me longing to my father's sight. For him 1,000 dangers I have sought, and rushing where the thickest Grecians fought, safe on my back the sacred burden brought. He for my sake the raging ocean tried, and wrath of heaven, my still auspicious guide, and bore beyond the strength decrepit age supplied. Oft since he breathed his last, in dead of night, his reverend image stood before my sight, enjoin'd to seek, below, his holy shade, conducted there by your unerring aid. But you, if pious minds by prayers are won, oblige the Father, and protect the Son. Yours is the power, nor Proserpine in vain has made you priestess of her nightly reign. If Orpheus, arm'd with his enchanting lyre, the ruthless king with pity could inspire, if from the shades below redeem his wife, if Pollux, offering his alternate life, could free his brother, and can daily go by turns aloft, by turns descend below, why name I Theseus, or his greater friend, who trode the downward path, and upward could ascend? Not less than theirs from Jove my lineage came, my mother greater, my descent the same. So pray'd the Trojan prince, and while he pray'd, his hands upon the holy altar laid. Then thus replied the prophetess divine: "O goddess born of great Anchises' line, the gates of hell are open night and day, smooth the descent, and easy is the way. But to return, and view the cheerful skies, in this the task and mighty labour lies. To few great Jupiter imparts this grace, and those of shining worth and heav'nly race. Betwixt those regions and our upper light, deep forests and impenetrable night possess the middle space. Th' infernal bounds Cocytus with his sable waves surrounds. But if so dire a love your soul invades, as twice below to view the trembling shades, if you so hard a toil will undertake, as twice to pass the navigable lake, receive my counsel. In the neighbouring grove there stands a tree, the queen of Stygian Jove claims it her own. Thick woods and gloomy night conceal this happy plant from human sight. One bough it bears, but, wondrous to behold, the ductile rind and leaves of radiant gold. This from the vulgar branches must be torn, and to fair Proserpine the present borne, ere leave be given to tempt the nether skies. The first thus rent, a second will arise, and the same metal the same room supplies. Look round the wood with lifted eyes to see the lurking gold upon the fatal tree, then rend it off, as holy rites command. The willing metal will obey thy hand, following with ease, if favour'd by thy fate. Thou art foredoom'd to view the Stygian state. If not, no labour can the tree constrain, and strength of stubborn arms and steel are vain. Besides, you know not, while you here attend, th' unworthy fate of your unhappy friend. Breathless he lies, and his unburied ghost, depriv'd of funeral rites, pollutes your host. Pay first his pious dues, and, for the dead, to sable sheep around his hearse be led. Then living turfs upon his body lay. This done, securely take the destined way, to find the regions destitute of day." She said, and held her peace. Aeneas went, sad from the cave, and full of discontent, unknowing what the sacred Sibyl meant. Achates, the companion of his breast, goes walking by his side, with equal cares oppressed. Walking they talked, and fruitlessly divined what friend the priestess by those words designed. But soon they found an object to deplore. Minesus lay extended on the shore, son of the god of winds, none so renowned, the warrior trumpet in the field to sound, with breathing brass to kindle fierce alarms, and rouse to dare their fate in honourable arms. He served great Hector, and was ever near, not with his trumpet only, but his spear. But by Pallades' arms when Hector fell, he chose Aeneas, and he chose as well. Swoln with applause, and aiming at still more, he now provokes the sea-gods from the shore. With envy Triton heard the martial sound, and the bold champion for his challenge drown'd. Then cast his mangled carcass on the strand. The gazing crowd around the body stand. All weep, but most Aeneas mourns his fate, and hastens to perform the funeral state. In altar-wise a stately pile they rear, the basis broad below, and top advanced in air. An ancient wood, fit for the work design'd, the shady covert of the salvage kind, the Trojans found. The sounding axe is plied, Firs, pines, and pitch trees, in the tow'ring pride of forest ashes, feel the fatal stroke, and piercing wedges cleave the stubborn oak. Huge trunks of trees, fell'd from the steepy crown of the bare mountains, roll with ruin down. Arm'd like the rest, the Trojan prince appears, and by his pious labour urges theirs. Thus while he wrought, revolving in his mind the ways to compass what his wish design'd, he cast his eyes upon the gloomy grove, and then with vows implor'd the Queen of Love. "O may thy pow'r, propitious still to me, conduct my steps to find the fatal tree in this deep forest, since the Sibyl's breath foretold, alas, too true, Maecenas' death." Scarce had he said, when full before his sight 2 doves, descending from their airy flight, secure upon the grassy plain alight. He knew his mother's birds, and thus he pray'd: "Be you my guides, with your auspicious aid, and lead my footsteps till the branch be found whose glittering shadow gilds the sacred ground. And thou, great parent, with celestial care, in this distress be present to my prayer." Thus having said, he stopp'd with watchful sight, observing still the motions of their flight, what course they took, what happy signs they show. They fed, and, flutt'ring, by degrees withdrew still farther from the place, but still in view. Hopping and flying, thus they led him on to the slow lake, whose baleful stench to shun they wing'd their flight aloft, then, stooping low, perch'd on the double tree that bears the golden bough. Thro' the green leaves the glittering shadows glow, as on the sacred oak the wintry mistletoe, where the proud mother views her precious brood, and happier branches which she never sow'd. Such was the glittering, such the ruddy rind, and dancing leaves that wanton'd in the wind. He seiz'd the shining bough with gripping hold, and rent away with ease the ling'ring gold, then to the Sibyl's palace bore the prize. Meantime the Trojan troops with weeping eyes to dead Maecenas pay his obsequies. First from the ground a lofty pile they rear, of pitch trees, oaks, and pines, and unctuous fir. The fabric's front with cypress twigs they strew, and stick the sides with boughs of baleful yew. The topmost part his glittering arms adorn. Warm waters then, in brazen caldrons borne, are pour'd to wash his body, joint by joint, and fragrant oils the stiffen'd limbs anoint. With groans and cries Maecenas they deplore, then on a bier with purple cover'd o'er the breathless body thus bewail'd they lay, and fire the pile, their faces turn'd away. Such reverend rites their fathers used to pay. Pure oil and incense on the fire they throw, and fat of victims which his friends bestow. These gifts the greedy flames to dust devour, then on the living coals red wine they pour, and last the relics by themselves dispose, which in a brazen urn the priests enclose. Old Corynaeus compass'd thrice the crew, and dipp'd an olive branch in holy dew, which thrice he sprinkled round, and thrice aloud invoked the dead, and then dismissed the crowd. But good Aeneas ordered on the shore a stately tomb, whose top a trumpet bore, a soldier's falchion, and a seaman's oar. Thus was his friend interr'd, and deathless fame still to the lofty cape consigns his name. These rites perform'd, the prince without delay hastes to the nether world his destined way. Deep was the cave, and downward as it went, from the wide mouth a rocky rough descent, and here the access a gloomy grove defends, and there the unnavigable lake extends, o'er whose unhappy waters, void of light, no bird presumes to steer his airy flight. Such deadly stenches from the depths arise, and steaming sulphur that infects the eyes. From thence the Grecian bards their legends make, and give the name Avernus to the lake. 4 sable bullocks in the yoke untaught, for sacrifice the pious hero brought. The priestess pours the wine betwixt their horns, then cuts the curling hair that first oblation burns, invoking Hecate hither to repair, a powerful name in hell and upper air. The sacred priests with ready knives bereave the beasts of life, and in full bowls receive the streaming blood, a lamb to hell and night, the sable wool without a streak of white. Aeneas offers, and by fate's decree a barren heifer, Proserpine, to thee. With holocausts he Pluto's altar fills, 7 brawny bulls with his own hand he kills. Then on the broiling entrails oil he pours, which ointed thus the raging flame devours. Late the nocturnal sacrifice begun, nor ended till the next returning sun. Then earth began to bellow, trees to dance, and howling dogs in glimmering light advance, ere Hecate came. "Far hence be souls profane," the Sibyl cried, "and from the grove abstain. Now, Trojan, take the way thy fates afford, assume thy courage, and unsheathe thy sword." She said, and passed along the gloomy space. The prince pursued her steps with equal pace. Ye realms yet unrevealed to human sight, ye gods who rule the regions of the night, ye gliding ghosts, permit me to relate the mystic wonders of your silent state. Obscure they went, through dreary shades that led along the waste dominions of the dead. Thus wander travellers in woods by night, by the moon's doubtful and malignant light, when Jove in dusky clouds involves the skies, and the faint crescent shoots by fits before their eyes. Just in the gate and in the jaws of hell, revengeful cares and sullen sorrows dwell, and pale diseases, and repining age, want, fear, and famine's unresisted rage. Here toils, and death's half-brother, sleep, forms terrible to view their sentry keep. With anxious pleasures of a guilty mind, deep frauds before, and open force behind, the Furies' iron beds, and strife that shakes her hissing tresses and unfolds her snakes. Full in the midst of this infernal road, an elm displays her dusky arms abroad. The god of sleep there hides his heavy head, and empty dreams on every leaf are spread. Of various forms unnumbered spectres more, centaurs in double shapes besiege the door. Before the passage horrid Hydra stands, and Briareus with all his 100 hands. Gorgons, Geryon with his triple frame, and vain Chimera vomits empty flame. The chief unsheathed his shining steel, prepared, though seized with sudden fear, to force the guard. Offering his brandished weapon at their face, had not the Sibyl stopped his eager pace, and told him what those empty phantoms were, forms without bodies, and impassive air. Hence to deep Acheron they take their way, whose troubled eddies, thick with ooze and clay, are whirled aloft, and in Cocytus lost. There Charon stands, who rules the dreary coast, a sordid god. Down from his hoary chin a length of beard descends, uncombed, unclean. His eyes like hollow furnaces on fire, a girdle, foul with grease, binds his obscene attire. He spreads his canvas, with his pole he steers, the freights of flitting ghosts in his thin bottom bears. He looked in years, yet in his years were seen a youthful vigour and autumnal green. An airy crowd came rushing where he stood, which filled the margin of the fatal flood, husbands and wives, boys and unmarried maids, and mighty heroes more majestic shades, and youths entombed before their fathers' eyes, with hollow groans and shrieks and feeble cries. Thick as the leaves in autumn strow the woods, or fowls by winter force forsake the floods, and wing their hasty flight to happier lands, such and so thick the shivering army stands, and press for passage with extended hands. Now these, now those, the surly boatman bore, the rest he drove to distance from the shore. The hero, who beheld with wondering eyes the tumult mix'd with shrieks, laments, and cries, ask'd of his guide what the rude concourse meant, why to the shore the thronging people bent, what forms of law among the ghosts were used, why some were ferried o'er, and some refused. "Son of Anchises, offspring of the gods," the Sibyl said, "you see the Stygian floods, the sacred stream which heav'n's imperial state attests in oaths, and fears to violate. The ghosts rejected are the unhappy crew, depriv'd of sepulchres and funeral due. The boatman, Charon, those the buried host, he ferries over to the farther coast, nor dares his transport vessel cross the waves, with such whose bones are not composed in graves. 100 years they wander on the shore, at length, their penance done, are wafted o'er." The Trojan chief his forward pace repress'd, resolving anxious thoughts within his breast. He saw his friends, who, whelm'd beneath the waves, their funeral honours claim'd, and ask'd their quiet graves. The lost Leucapsis in the crowd he knew, and brave leader of the Lycian crew, whom on the Tyrian seas the tempests met, the sailors master'd, and the ships o'erset. Amidst the spirits Palinurus press'd, yet fresh from life, a new admitted guest, who, while his steering view'd the stars, and bore his course from Afric to the Latian shore, fell headlong down. The Trojan fix'd his view, and scarcely through the gloom the sullen shadow knew. Then thus the prince: "What envious pow'r, O friend, brought your lov'd life to this disastrous end? For Phoebus, ever true in all he said, has in your fate alone my faith betray'd. The god foretold you should not die before you reach'd, secure from seas, th' Italian shore. Is this th' unerring pow'r?" The ghost replied: "Nor Phoebus flatter'd, nor his answers lied, nor envious gods have sent me to the deep. But while the stars in course of heav'n I keep, my wearied eyes were seiz'd with fatal sleep. I fell, and with my weight the helm constrain'd was drawn along, which yet my grip retain'd. Now by the winds and raging waves I swear, your safety more than mine was then my care, lest of the guide bereft, the rudder lost, your ship should run against the rocky coast. 3 blust'ring nights, borne by the southern blast, I floated, and discover'd land at last. High on a mountain wave my head I bore, forcing my strength, and gath'ring to the shore. Panting, but past the danger, now I seiz'd the craggy cliffs, and my tir'd members eas'd. While cumber'd with my dropping clothes I lay, the cruel nation, covetous of prey, stain'd with my blood th' unhospitable coast. And now by winds and waves my lifeless limbs are toss'd, which avert by yon ethereal light, which I have lost for this eternal night. Or if by dearer ties you may be won, by your dead sire, and by your living son, redeem from this reproach my wandering ghost; or with your navy seek the Velin coast, and in a peaceful grave my corpse compose; or if a nearer way your mother shows, without whose aid you durst not undertake this frightful passage o'er the Stygian lake, lend to this wretch your hand, and waft him o'er to the sweet banks of yon forbidden shore." Scarce had he said, the prophetess began: "What hopes delude thee, miserable man? Think'st thou thus unentomb'd to cross the floods, to view the Furies and infernal gods, and visit without leave the dark abodes? Attend the term of long revolving years; fate and the dooming gods are deaf to tears. This comfort of thy dire misfortune take: the wrath of heav'n, inflicted for thy sake, with vengeance shall pursue th' inhuman coast, till they propitiate thy offended ghost, and raise a tomb, with vows and solemn prayer, and Palinurus' name the place shall bear." This calm'd his cares, sooth'd with his future fame, and pleas'd to hear his propagated name. Now nearer to the Stygian lake they draw, who from the shore the surly boatmen saw, observ'd their passage through the shady wood, and mark'd their near approaches to the flood. Then thus he call'd aloud, inflam'd with wrath: "Mortal, whate'er, who this forbidden path in arms presum'st to tread, I charge thee, stand, and tell thy name and business in the land. Know this: the realm of night, the Stygian shore, my boat conveys no living bodies o'er. Nor was I pleas'd great Theseus once to bear, who forc'd a passage with his pointed spear, nor strong Atrides, men of mighty fame, and from th' immortal gods their lineage came. In fetters one the barking porter tied, and took him trembling from his sov'reign's side. 2 sought by force to seize his beauteous bride. To whom the Sibyl thus: "Compose thy mind, nor frauds are here contriv'd, nor force design'd. Still may the dog the wandering troops constrain Of airy ghosts, and vex the guilty train, And with her grisly lord his lovely queen remain. The Trojan chief, whose lineage is from Jove, Much fam'd for arms, and more for filial love, Is sent to seek his sire in your Elysian grove. If neither pity nor heav'n's command Can gain his passage to the Stygian strand, this fatal present shall prevail at least: then show'd the shining bough conceal'd within her vest. No more was needful, for the gloomy god stood mute with awe to see the golden rod, admir'd the destined offering to his queen, a venerable gift so rarely seen. His fury thus appeased, he puts to land, the ghosts forsake their seats at his command. He clears the deck, receives the mighty freight, the leaky vessel groans beneath the weight. Slowly she sails, and scarcely stems the tides, the pressing water pours within her sides. His passengers at length are wafted o'er, exposed in muddy weeds upon the miry shore. No sooner landed, in his den they found the triple porter of the Stygian sound, grim Cerberus, who soon began to rear his crested snakes and arm'd his bristling hair. The prudent Sibyl had before prepar'd a sop, in honey steep'd, to charm the guard, which, mix'd with powerful drugs, she cast before his greedy grinning jaws just oped to roar. With 3 enormous mouths he gapes, and straight, with hunger press'd, devours the pleasing bait. Long draughts of sleep his monstrous limbs enslave, he reels, and, falling, fills the spacious cave. The keeper charm'd, the chief without delay pass'd on, and took th' irremeable way. Before the gates, the cries of babes new born, whom fate had from their tender mothers torn, assault his ears. Then those whose form of laws condemn to die when traitors judge their cause. Nor want they lots, nor judges to review the wrongful sentence and award anew. Minos, the strict inquisitor, appears, and lives and crimes with his assessors hears. Round in his urn the blended balls he rolls, absolves the just and dooms the guilty souls. The next in place and punishment are they who prodigally throw their souls away, fools who, repining at their wretched state, and loathing anxious life, suborn their fate. With late repentance now they would retrieve the bodies they forsook, and wish to live, their pains and poverty desire to bear, to view the light of heaven and breathe the vital air. But fate forbids, the Stygian floods oppose, and with circling streams the captive souls enclose. End of Book 6, Part 1. Book 6, The World Below, Part 2. Not far from thence the mournful fields appear, so called from lovers that inhabit there. The souls whom that unhappy flame invades, in secret solitude and myrtle shades, make endless moans, and, pining with desire, lament too late their unextinguished fire. Here Procris, Eriphyle here he found, baring her breast, yet bleeding with the wound made by her son. He saw Pasiphae there, with Phaedra's ghost, a foul incestuous pair. There Laodamia with Evadne moves, unhappy both loyal in their loves. Caeneus, a woman once, and once a man, but ending in the sex she first began. Not far from those, Phoenician Dido stood, fresh from her wound, her bosom bathed in blood, whom when the Trojan hero hardly knew, obscure in shades, and with a doubtful view, doubtful is he who sees through dusky night, or thinks he sees the moon's uncertain light. With tears he first approach'd the sullen shade, and as his love inspired him, thus he said: "Unhappy queen, then is the common breath of rumour true in your reported death? And I, alas, the cause? By heaven I vow, and all the powers that rule the realms below, unwilling I forsook your friendly state, commanded by the gods, and forced by fate. Those gods, that fate, whose unresisted might have sent me to these regions void of light, through the vast empire of eternal night. Nor dared I to presume that, press'd with grief, my flight should urge you to this dire relief. Stay, stay your steps, and listen to my vows. 'Tis the last interview that fate allows." In vain he thus attempts her mind to move, with tears and prayers and late repenting love. Disdainfully she look'd, then turning round, but fix'd her eyes unmoved upon the ground, and what he says and swears regards no more than the deaf rocks when the loud billows roar, but whirl'd away, to shun his hateful sight, hid in the forest and the shades of night. Then sought Sichaeus through the shady grove, who answer'd all her cares, and equal'd all her love. Some pious tears the pitying hero paid, and follow'd with his eyes the flitting shade, then took the forward way, by fate ordain'd, and with his guide the farther fields attain'd, where sever'd from the rest the warrior souls remained. Tydeus he met, with Meleager's race, the pride of armies and the soldier's grace, and pale Adrastus with his ghastly face. Of Trojan chiefs he view'd a num'rous train, all much lamented, all in battle slain. Glaucus and Medon high above the rest, and Tenor's sons, and Ceres' sacred priest, and proud Idaeus, Priam's charioteer, who shakes his empty reins and aims his airy spear. The gladsome ghosts encircling troops attend, and with unwearied eyes behold their friend, delight to hover near, and long to know what business brought him to the realms below. But Argive chiefs, and Agamemnon's train, when his refulgent arms flash'd through the shady plain, fled from his well-known face with wonted fear, as when his thund'ring sword and pointed spear drove headlong to their ships, and gleaned the routed rear. They raised a feeble cry with trembling notes, but the weak voice deceived their gasping throats. Here Priam's son Deiphobus he found, whose face and limbs were one continued wound. Dishonest, with lopped arm the youth appears, spoil'd of his nose and shortened of his ears. He scarcely knew him, striving to disown his blotted form and blushing to be known, and therefore first began: "O Teucer's race, who durst thy faultless figure thus deface? What heart could wish, what hand inflict this dire disgrace? 'Twas fam'd that in our last and fatal night your single prowess long sustain'd the fight, till tir'd, not forced, a glorious fate you chose, and fell upon a heap of slaughter'd foes. But in remembrance of so brave a deed, a tomb and funeral honours I decreed, thrice call'd your manes on the Trojan plains, the place your armour and your name retains. Your body too I sought, and had I found, design'd for burial in your native ground." The ghost replied, "Your piety has paid all needful rites to rest my wandering shade. But cruel fate, and my more cruel wife, to Grecian swords betray'd my sleeping life. These are the monuments of Helen's love, the shame I bear below, the marks I bore above. You know in what deluding joys we pass'd the night that was by heav'n decreed our last. For when the fatal horse, descending down, pregnant with arms, o'erwhelm'd the unhappy town, she feign'd nocturnal orgies, left my bed, and mix'd with Trojan dames the dances led, then waving high her torch the signal made, which rous'd the Grecians from their ambuscade. With watching overworn, with cares oppress'd, unhappy I had lain me down to rest, and heavy sleep my weary limbs possess'd. Meantime my worthy wife our arms mislaid, and from beneath my head my sword convey'd. The door unlatch'd, and with repeated calls invites her former lord within my walls. Thus in her crime her confidence she placed, and with new treason would redeem the past. What need I more? Into the room they ran, and meanly murder'd a defenceless man. Ulysses, basely born, first led the way. Avenging powers, with justice if I pray that fortune be their own another day. But answer you, and in your turn relate, what brought you living to the Stygian state, driven by the winds and errors of the sea? Or did you heaven's superior doom obey? Or tell what other chance conducts your way, to view with mortal eyes our dark retreats, tumults and torments of the infernal seats. While thus in talk the flying hours they pass, the sun had finish'd more than half his race, and they, perhaps in words and tears, have spent the little time of stay which heav'n had lent. But thus the Sibyl chides their long delay: "Night rushes down, and headlong drives the day. 'Tis here in different paths the way divides, the right to Pluto's golden palace guides, the left to that unhappy region tends, which to the depth of Tartarus descends, the seat of night profound and punish'd fiends." Then thus Deiphobus: "O sacred maid, forbear to chide, and be your will obey'd. Lo, to the secret shadows I retire, to pay my penance till my years expire. Proceed, auspicious prince, with glory crown'd, and born to better fates than I have found." He said, and while he said, his steps he turn'd To secret shadows, and in silence mourn'd. The hero, looking on the left, espied a lofty tower, and strong on every side, with treble walls, which Phlegethon surrounds, whose fiery flood the burning empire bounds, and press'd betwixt the rocks, the bellowing noise resounds. Wide is the fronting gate, and raised on high, with adamantine columns threats the sky. Vain is the force of man, and heav'n's as vain, to crush the pillars which the pile sustain. Sublime on these a tower of steel is rear'd, and dire Tisiphone there keeps the ward, girt in her sanguine gown, by night and day, observant of the souls that pass the downward way. From thence are heard the groans of ghosts, the pains of sounding lashes and of dragging chains. The Trojan stood, astonish'd at their cries, and ask'd his guide from whence those yells arise, and what the crimes, and what the tortures were, and loud laments that rent the liquid air. She thus replied: "The chaste and holy race are all forbidden this polluted place. But Hecate, when she gave to rule the woods, then led me trembling through these dire abodes, and taught the tortures of th' avenging gods. These are the realms of unrelenting fate, and awful Rhadamanthus rules the state. He hears and judges each committed crime, enquires into the matter, place, and time. The conscious wretch must all his acts reveal, loath to confess, unable to conceal. From the first moment of his vital breath, to his last hour of unrepenting death. Straight o'er the guilty ghost the Fury shakes the sounding whip, and brandishes her snakes, and the pale sinner with her sisters takes. Then of itself unfolds the eternal door, with dreadful sounds the brazen hinges roar. You see, before the gate, what stalking ghost commands the guard, what sentries keep the post. More formidable Hydra stands within, whose jaws with iron teeth severely grin. The gaping gulf low to the centre lies, and twice as deep as earth is distant from the skies. The rivals of the gods, the Titan race, here singed with lightning roll within the unfathomed space. Here lie the alien twins, I saw them both, enormous bodies of gigantic growth, who dared in fight the Thunderer to defy, affect his heaven, and force him from the sky. Salmoneus suffering cruel pains I found, for emulating Jove the rattling sound of mimic thunder, and the glittering blaze of pointed lightnings and their forky rays. Through Elis and the Grecian towns he flew, th' audacious wretch 4 fiery coursers drew. He waved a torch aloft, and madly vain sought godlike worship from a servile train. Ambitious fool, with horny hooves to pass o'er hollow arches of resounding brass, to rival thunder in its rapid course, and imitate inimitable force. But he, the King of heaven, obscure on high, bared his red arm, and launching from the sky his writhen bolt, not shaking empty smoke, down to the deep abyss the flaming felon strook. There Tityus was to see, who took his birth from heaven, his nursing from the foodful earth. Here his gigantic limbs, with large embrace, enfold 9 acres of infernal space. A ravenous vulture, in his open'd side, her crooked beak and cruel talons tried, still for the growing liver digg'd his breast. The growing liver still supplied the feast. Still are his entrails fruitful to their pains. The immortal hunger lasts, the immortal food remains. Ixion and Perithous I could name, and more Thessalian chiefs of mighty fame. High o'er their heads a mouldering rock is placed, that promises a fall, and shakes at every blast. They lie below, on golden beds display'd, and genial feasts with regal pomp are made. The Queen of Furies by their sides is set, and snatches from their mouths th' untasted meat, which if they touch, her hissing snakes she rears, tossing her torch and thundering in their ears. Then they, who brothers better claim disown'd, expel their parents and usurp the throne, defraud their clients, and to lucre sold, sit brooding on unprofitable gold, who dare not give, and even refuse to lend to their poor kindred, or a wanting friend. Vast is the throng of these, nor less the train, of lustful youths for foul adult'ry slain, hosts of deserters who their honour sold, and basely broke their faith for bribes of gold. All these within the dungeon's depth remain, despairing pardon, and expecting pain. Ask not what pains, nor further seek to know Their process, or the forms of law below. Some roll'd a weighty stone, some laid along, and bound with burning wires, on spokes of wheels are hung. Unhappy Theseus, doom'd for ever there, is fix'd by fate on his eternal chair. And wretched Phlegyas warns the world with cries, could warning make the world more just or wise. Learn righteousness, and dread th' avenging deities. To tyrants others have their country sold, imposing foreign lords for foreign gold. Some have old laws repeal'd, new statutes made, not as the people pleased, but as they paid. With incest some their daughters' beds profaned. All dared the worst of ills, and what they dared, attained. Had I 100 mouths, 100 tongues, and throats of brass inspir'd with iron lungs, I could not half those horrid crimes repeat, nor half the punishments those crimes have met. But let us haste our voyage to pursue. The walls of Pluto's palace are in view. The gate and iron arch above it stands, on anvils labour'd by the Cyclops' hands. Before our farther way the fates allow, here must we fix, on high, the golden bough. She said, and through the gloomy shades they pass'd, and choose the middle path. Arriv'd at last, the prince with living water sprinkled o'er his limbs and body, then approach'd the door, possess'd the porch, and on the front above he fix'd the fatal bough requir'd by Pluto's love. These holy rites perform'd, they took their way where long extended plains of pleasure lay. The verdant fields with those of heav'n may vie, with ether vested, and a purple sky, the blissful seats of happy souls below. Stars of their own, and their own sons they know, their airy limbs in sports they exercise, and on the green contend the wrestler's prize. Some in heroic verse divinely sing, others in artful measures led the ring. The Thracian bard, surrounded by the rest, there stands conspicuous in his flowing vest. His flying fingers and harmonious quill strike 7 distinguish'd notes, and 7 at once they fill. Here found they Teucer's old heroic race, born better times and happier years to grace. Assaracus and Ilus here enjoy perpetual fame, with him who founded Troy. The chief beheld their chariots from afar, their shining arms and coursers train'd to war, their lances fix'd in earth, their steeds around, free from their harness, grazed the flowery ground. The love of horses which they had alive, and care of chariots, after death, survive. Some cheerful souls were feasting on the plain, some did the song, and some the choir maintain, beneath a laurel shade, where mighty Po mounts up to woods above, and hides his head below. Here patriots live, who for their country's good, in fighting fields were prodigal of blood. Priests of unblemish'd lives here make abode, and poets worthy their inspiring god, and searching wits of more mechanic parts, who grac'd their age with new invented arts. Those who to worth their bounty did extend, and those who knew that bounty to commend. The heads of these with holy fillets bound, and all their temples were with garlands crowned. To these the Sibyl thus her speech address'd, and first to him surrounded by the rest. Towering his height, and ample was his breast. Say, happy souls, divine Musaeus, say, where lives Anchises, and where lies our way, to find the hero, for whose only sake we sought the dark abodes, and cross'd the bitter lake? To this the sacred poet thus replied: In no fix'd place the happy souls reside. In groves we live, and lie on mossy beds, by crystal streams that murmur through the meads. But pass yon easy hill, and thence descend, the path conducts you to your journey's end. This said, he led them up the mountain's brow, and shows them all the shining fields below. They wind the hill, and through the blissful meadows go. But old Anchises, in a flowery vale, review'd his muster'd race, and took the tale, those happy spirits, which, ordained by fate, for future beings and new bodies wait. With studious thought observ'd the lustrous throng, in nature's order as they pass'd along, their names, their fates, their conduct, and their care, in peaceful senates and successful war. He, when Aeneas on the plain appears, meets him with open arms and falling tears. "Welcome," he said, "the gods' undoubted race, O long expected to my dear embrace! Once more 'tis given me to behold your face. once more 'tis given me to behold your face. The love and pious duty which you pay have pass'd the perils of so hard a way. 'Tis true, computing times, I now believe the happy day approach'd, nor are my hopes deceived. What length of lands, what oceans have you pass'd? What storms sustain'd, and on what shores been cast? How have I fear'd your fate, but fear'd it most when love assail'd you on the Libyan coast. To this the filial duty thus replies: Your sacred ghost before my sleeping eyes appear'd, and often urg'd this painful enterprise. After long tossing on the Tyrrhene sea, my navy rides at anchor in the bay. But reach your hand, O parent shade, the dear embraces of your longing son, he said, and falling tears his face bedew. Then thrice around his neck his arms he threw, and thrice the flitting shadow slipp'd away, like winds or empty dreams that fly the day. Now in a secret vale the Trojan sees a separate grove, through which a gentle breeze plays with a passing breath, and whispers through the trees. And just before the confines of the wood, the gliding Lethe leads her silent flood. About the boughs an airy nation flew, thick as the humming bees that hunt the golden dew, in summer's heat on tops of lilies feed, and creep within their bells to suck the balmy seed. The winged army roams the fields around, the rivers and the rocks remurmur to the sound. Aeneas wondering stood, then ask'd the cause, which to the stream the crowding people draws. Then thus the sire: The souls that throng the flood are those to whom by fate our other bodies owed. In Lethe's lake they long oblivion taste, of future life secure, forgetful of the past. Long has my soul desir'd this time and place, to set before your sight your glorious race, that this presaging joy may fire your mind, to seek the shores by destiny design'd. O father, can it be that souls sublime return to visit our terrestrial clime, and that the gen'rous mind, releas'd by death, can covet lazy limbs and mortal breath? Anchises then in order thus began to clear those wonders to his godlike son. Know first, that heav'n and earth's compacted frame, and flowing waters, and the starry flame, and both the radiant lights, one common soul, inspires and feeds and animates the whole. This active mind, infused through all the space, unites and mingles with the mighty mass. Hence men and beasts the breath of life obtain, and birds of air, and monsters of the main. Th' ethereal vigour is in all the same, and every soul is fill'd with equal flame, as much as earthy limbs and gross allay of mortal members, subject to decay, blunt not the beams of heav'n and edge of day. From this coarse mixture of terrestrial parts, desire and fear by turns possess their hearts, and grief and joy; nor can the grovelling mind, in the dark dungeon of the limbs confin'd, assert the native skies, or own its heav'nly kind. Nor death itself can wholly wash their stains, but long contracted filth ev'n in the soul remains. The relics of inveterate vice they wear, and spots of sin obscene in every face appear. For this are varied penances enjoin'd, and some are hung to bleach upon the wind, some plunged in waters, others purged in fires, till all the dregs are drained, and all the rust expires. All have their manes, and those manes bear; the few so cleansed to these abodes repair, and breathe in ample fields the soft Elysian air. Then are they happy, when by length of time the scurf is worn away of each committed crime. No speck is left of their habitual stains, but the pure ether of the soul remains. But when 1,000 rolling years are past, so long their punishments and penance last, whole droves of minds are, by the driving god, compell'd to drink the deep Lethean flood, in large forgetful draughts to steep the cares of their past labours and their irksome years, that, unremembering of its former pain, the soul may suffer mortal flesh again. Thus having said, the father's spirit leads the priestess and his son through swarms of shades, and takes a rising ground, from thence to see the long procession of his progeny. Survey, pursued the sire, this airy throng, as offer'd to thy view they pass along. These are the Italian names, which fate will join with ours and graph upon the Trojan line. Observe the youth, who first appears in sight, and holds the nearest station to the light, already seems to snuff the vital air, and leans just forward on a shining spear. Silvius is he, thy last begotten race, but first in order sent to fill thy place. An Alban name, but mixed with Dardan blood, born in the covert of a shady wood. Him fair Lavinia, thy surviving wife, shall breed in groves to lead a solitary life. In Alba shall he fix his royal seat, and born a king, a race of kings beget. Then Procas, honour of the Trojan name, Capys and Numitor of endless fame. A second Silvius after these appears, Silvius Aeneas, for thy name he bears, for arms and justice equally renowned, who late restored in Alba shall be crowned. How great they look, how vigorously they wield their weighty lances, and sustain the shield. But they, who crowned with oaken wreaths appear, shall Gabian walls and strong Fidena rear. Nomentum, Bola, with Pometia found, and raise Collatian's towers on rocky ground. All these shall then be towns of mighty fame, though now they lie obscure, and lands without a name. See Romulus the Great, born to restore the crown that once his injured grandsire wore. This prince a priestess of your blood shall bear, and like his sire in arms he shall appear. 2 rising crests his royal head adorn, born from a god, himself to godhead born. His sire already signs him for the skies, and marks the seat amidst the deities. Auspicious chief, thy race in times to come shall spread the conquests of imperial Rome. Rome, whose ascending towers shall heaven invade, involving earth and ocean in her shade, high as the mother of the gods in place, and proud, like her, of an immortal race. Then when in pomp she makes the Phrygian round, with golden turrets on her temples crowned, 100 gods her sweeping train supply, her offspring all, and all command the sky. Now fix your sight, and stand intent to see your Roman race and Julian progeny. The mighty Caesar waits his vital hour, impatient for the world, and grasps his promised power. But next, behold the youth of form divine, Caesar himself, exalted in his line, Augustus, promised oft, and long foretold, sent to the realm that Saturn ruled of old, born to restore a better age of gold. Afric and India shall his powers obey, he shall extend his propagated sway beyond the solar year, without the starry way, where Atlas turns the rolling heavens around, and his broad shoulders with their lights are crowned. At his foreseen approach already quake the Caspian kingdoms and Maeotian lake. Their seers behold the tempest from afar, and threatening oracles denounce the war. Nile hears him knocking at his sevenfold gates, and seeks his hidden spring, and fears his nephew's fates. Nor Hercules more lands or labours knew, not though the brazen-footed hind he slew, freed Erymanthus from the foaming boar, and dipped his arrows in Lernaean gore. Nor Bacchus, turning from his Indian war, by tigers drawn triumphant in his car, from Nisus' top descending on the plains, with curling vines around his purple reins. And doubt we yet through dangers to pursue the paths of honour, and a crown in view? But what's the man who from afar appears? His head with olive crowned, his hand a censer bears, his hoary beard and holy vestments bring his lost idea back. I know the Roman king, he shall to peaceful Rome new laws ordain, called from his mean abode a sceptre to sustain. Him Tullus next in dignity succeeds, an active prince, and prone to martial deeds. He shall his troops for fighting fields prepare, disused to toils and triumphs of the war. By dint of sword his crown he shall increase, and scour his armour from the rust of peace. Whom Ancus follows with a fawning air, but vain within, and proudly popular. Next view the Tarquin kings, the venging sword of Brutus justly drawn, and Rome restored. He first renews the rods in acts severe, and gives the consuls royal robes to wear. His sons, who seek the tyrant to sustain, and long for arbitrary lords again, with ignominy scourged in open sight, he dooms to death deserved, asserting public right. Unhappy man, to break the pious laws of nature, pleading in his children's cause! Howe'er the doubtful fact is understood, 'tis love of honour and his country's good, the consul, not the father, sheds the blood. Behold Tarquatus the same track pursue, and next the two devoted Decii view, the Drusian line, Camillus loaded home, with standards well redeem'd, and foreign foes o'ercome, the pair you see in equal armour shine. Now friends below in close embraces join, but when they leave the shady realms of night, and clothed in bodies breathe your upper light, with mortal hate each other shall pursue. What wars, what wounds, what slaughter shall ensue! From Alpine heights the father first descends, his daughter's husband in the plain attends, his daughter's husband arms his eastern friends. Embrace again, my sons, be foes no more, nor stain your country with her children's gore. And thou, the first, lay down thy lawless claim, thou of my blood, who bearest the Julian name. Another comes, who shall in triumph ride, and to the Capitol his chariot guide, from conquered Corinth, rich with Grecian spoils. And yet another, fam'd for warlike toils, on Argos shall impose the Roman laws, and on the Greeks revenge the Trojan cause, shall drag in chains their Achillean race, shall vindicate his ancestors' disgrace, and Pallas for her violated place. Great Cato there, for gravity renown'd, and conqu'ring Cossus goes with laurels crown'd. Who can omit the Gracchi? Who declare the Scipio's worth, those thunderbolts of war, the double bane of Carthage? Who can see, without esteem for virtuous poverty, severe Fabricius, or can cease t' admire the ploughman consul in his coarse attire? Tired as I am, my praise the Fabii claim, and thou, great hero, greatest of thy name, ordain'd in war to save the sinking state, and by delays to put a stop to fate. Let others better mould the running mass of metals, and inform the breathing brass, and soften into flesh a marble face. Plead better at the bar, describe the skies, and when the stars descend and when they rise. But Rome, 'tis thine alone, with awful sway, to rule mankind, and make the world obey, disposing peace and war by thine own majestic way, to tame the proud, the fettered slave to free. These are imperial arts, and worthy thee. He paused, and while with wondering eyes they view'd the passing spirits, thus his speech renew'd. See great Marcellus! How, untir'd in toils, he moves with manly grace, how rich with regal spoils! He, when his country, threaten'd with alarms, requires his courage and his conqu'ring arms, shall more than once the Punic bands affright, shall kill the Gaulish king in single fight, then to the Capitol in triumph move, and the third spoils shall grace Feretrian Jove. Aeneas here beheld, of form divine, a godlike youth in glittering armour shine, with great Marcellus keeping equal pace, but gloomy were his eyes, dejected was his face. He saw, and, wondering, ask'd his airy guide, what and of whence was he, who press'd the hero's side? His son, or one of his illustrious name? How like the former, and almost the same! Observe the crowds that compass him around, all gaze and all admire and raise a shouting sound, but hovering mists around his brows are spread, and night with sable shades involves his head. Seek not to know, the ghost replied with tears, the sorrows of thy sons in future years. This youth, the blissful vision of a day, shall just be shown on earth, and snatch'd away. The gods too high had raised the Roman state, were but their gifts as permanent as great. What groans of men shall feel the Martian field? How fierce a blaze his flaming pile shall yield? What funeral pomp shall flowing Tiber see, when rising from his bed he views the sad solemnity? No youth shall equal hopes of glory give, no youth afford so great a cause to grieve. The Trojan honour and the Roman boast, admir'd when living and ador'd when lost, mirror of ancient faith in early youth, undaunted worth, inviolable truth. No foe unpunish'd in the fighting field shall dare thee, foot to foot, with sword and shield, much less in arms oppose thy matchless force, when thy sharp spurs shall urge thy foaming horse. Ah, couldst thou break through fate's severe decree, a new Marcellus shall arise in thee. Full canisters of fragrant lilies bring, mix'd with the purple roses of the spring. Let me with funeral flowers his body strew, this gift which parents to their children owe, this unavailing gift at least I may bestow." Thus having said, he led the hero round the confines of the blest Elysian ground, which when Anchises to his son had shown, and fir'd his mind to mount the promis'd throne, he tells the future wars ordained by fate, the strength and customs of the Latian state, the prince and people, and for arms his care, with rules to push his fortune or to bear. 2 gates the silent house of sleep adorn, of polish'd ivory this, that of transparent horn. True visions through transparent horn arise, through polish'd ivory pass deluding lies. Of various things discoursing as he pass'd, Anchises hither bends his steps at last. Then through the gate of ivory he dismiss'd his valiant offspring and divining guest. Straight to the ships Aeneas his way, embark'd his men, and skimm'd along the sea, still coasting, till he gain'd Cajeta's bay. At length on oozy ground his galleys moor, their heads are turn'd to sea, their sterns to shore. End of Book 6.
Book 7. Juno served by a Fury, Part 1. And thou, O matron of immortal fame, here dying, to the shore hast left thy name. Cajeta still the place is call'd from thee, the nurse of great Aeneas' infancy. Here rest thy bones in rich Hesperia's plains. Thy name, 'tis all a ghost can have, remains. Now, when the prince her funeral rites had paid, he plow'd the Tyrrhene seas with sails display'd. From land a gentle breeze arose by night, serenely shone the stars, the moon was bright, and the sea trembled with her silver light. Now near the shelves of Circe's shores they run, Circe the rich, the daughter of the sun. A dangerous coast, the goddess wastes her days In joyous songs, the rocks resound her lays. In spinning, o'er the loom she spends the night, And cedar brands supply her father's light. From hence were heard rebellowing to the main The roars of lions that refuse the chain, The grunts of bristled boars, the groans of bears, And herds of howling wolves that stun the sailors' ears. These from their caverns, at the close of night, Fill the sad isle with horror and affright. Darkling they mourn their fate, whom Circe's pow'r, That watch'd the moon and planetary hour, With words and wicked herbs from humankind Had alter'd, and in brutal shapes confin'd. Which monsters, lest the Trojans' pious host Should bear, or touch upon th' enchanted coast, Propitious Neptune steer'd their course by night With rising gales that sped their happy flight. Supplied with these, they skim the sounding shore, And hear the swelling surges vainly roar. Now, when the rosy morn began to rise, And wav'd her saffron streamer through the skies, When Thetis blush'd in purple not her own, And from her face the breathing winds were blown, a sudden silence sate upon the sea, And sweeping oars with struggling urg'd their way. The Trojan from the main beheld a wood, Which thick with shades and a brown horror stood. Betwixt the trees the Tiber took his course, With whirlpools dimpled, and with downward force That drove the sand along, he took his way, And roll'd his yellow billows to the sea. About him, and above, and round the wood, The birds that haunt the borders of his flood, That bath'd within, or bask'd upon his side, To tuneful songs their narrow throats applied. The captain gives command, the joyful train Glide through the gloomy shade, and leave the main. Now, Erato, thy poet's mind inspire, And fill his soul with thy celestial fire. Relate what Latium was, her ancient kings; Declare the past and state of things, When first the Trojan fleet Ausonia sought, And how the rivals lov'd, and how they fought. These are my theme; and how the war began, And how concluded by the godlike man. For I shall sing of battles, blood, and rage, Which princes and their people did engage; And haughty souls, that, mov'd with mutual hate, In fighting fields pursued and found their fate; That rous'd the Tyrrhene realm with loud alarms, And peaceful Italy involv'd in arms. A larger scene of action is display'd, And, rising hence, a greater work is weigh'd. Latinus, old and mild, had long possess'd The Latin scepter, and his people bless'd. His father Faunus, a Laurentian dame; His mother, fair Marica was her name. But Faunus came from Picus; Picus drew his birth from Saturn, if records be true. Thus King Latinus, in the third degree, Had Saturn author of his family. But this old peaceful prince, as Heav'n decreed, Was bless'd with no male issue to succeed. His sons in blooming youth were snatch'd by fate; One only daughter heir'd the royal state. Fir'd with her love, and with ambition led, The neighb'ring princes court her nuptial bed. Among the crowd, but far above the rest, Young Turnus to the beauteous maid address'd. Turnus, for high descent and graceful mien, Was first, and favour'd by the Latian queen. With him she strove to join Lavinia's hand, But dire portents the purpos'd match withstand. Deep in the palace, of long growth, there stood A laurel's trunk, a venerable wood, Where rites divine were paid; whose holy hair Was kept and cut with superstitious care. This plant Latinus, when his town he wall'd, Then found, and from the tree Laurentum call'd. And last, in honour of his new abode, He vow'd the laurel to the laurel's god. It happen'd once, a boding prodigy, A swarm of bees that cut the liquid sky, Unknown from whence they took their airy flight, Upon the topmost branch in clouds alight. There with their clasping feet together clung, And a long cluster from the laurel hung. An ancient augur prophesied from hence: "Behold, on Latian shores a foreign prince! From the same parts of heav'n his navy stands, To the same parts on earth his army lands. The town he conquers, and the tow'r commands." Yet more, when fair Lavinia fed the fire Before the gods, and stood beside her sire, Strange to relate, the flames, involv'd in smoke Of incense from the sacred altar broke, Caught her dishevel'd hair and rich attire; Her crown and jewels crackled in the fire; From thence the fuming trail began to spread, And lambent glories danc'd about her head. This new portent the seer with wonder views, Then, pausing, thus his prophecy renews: "The nymph, who scatters flaming fires around, Shall shine with honour, shall herself be crown'd; But, caus'd by her irrevocable fate, War shall the country waste, and change the state." Latinus, frighted with this dire ostent, For counsel to his father Faunus went, And sought the shades, renown'd for prophecy, Which near Albunia's sulph'rous fountain lie. To these the Latian and the Sabine land Fly, when distress'd, and thence relief demand. The priest on skins of off'rings takes his ease, and nightly visions in his slumber sees. A swarm of thin aerial shapes appears, and flutt'ring round his temples deafs his ears. These he consults, and the future fates to know, from powers above and from the fiends below. Here for the gods' advice Latinus flies, off'ring 100 sheep for sacrifice. Their woolly fleeces, as the rites requir'd, he laid beneath him, and to rest retir'd. No sooner were his eyes in slumber bound, when from above a more than mortal sound invades his ears, and thus the vision spoke: "Seek not, my seed, in Latian bands to yoke Our fair Lavinia, nor the gods provoke. A foreign son upon thy shore descends, Whose martial fame from pole to pole extends. His race in arms and arts of peace renown'd, Not Latium shall contain, nor Europe bound. 'Tis theirs, whate'er the sun surveys around." These answers, in the silent night receiv'd, The king himself divulg'd, the land believ'd. The fame thro' all the neighb'ring nations flew, When now the Trojan navy was in view. Beneath a shady tree the hero spread His table on the turf, with cakes of bread, And with his chiefs on forest fruits he fed. They sate, and not without the gods' command. Their homely fare dispatch'd, the hungry band Invade their trenchers next, and soon devour, To mend the scanty meal, their cakes of flour. Ascanius thus observ'd, and smiling said: "See, we devour the plates on which we fed." The speech had omen, that the Trojan race Should find repose, and this the time and place. Aeneas took the word, and thus replies, Confessing fate with wonder in his eyes: "All hail, O earth! all hail, my household gods! Behold the destin'd place of your abodes: For thus Anchises prophesied of old, And this our fatal place of rest foretold, When, on a foreign shore, instead of meat, By famine forc'd, your trenchers shall you eat. Then ease your weary Trojans will attend, And the long labours of your voyage end. Remember on that happy coast to build, And with a trench enclose the fruitful field. This was that famine, this the fatal place Which ends the wand'ring of our exil'd race. Then on tomorrow's dawn your care employ, To search the land, and where the cities lie, And what the men: but give this day to joy. Now pour to Jove, and after Jove is blest, Call great Anchises to the genial feast, Crown high the goblets with a cheerful draught, Enjoy the present hour, adjourn the future thought." Thus having said, the hero bound his brows With leafy branches, then perform'd his vows, Adoring first the genius of the place, Then Earth, the mother of the heav'nly race. The nymphs, and native godheads yet unknown, And Night, and all the stars that gild her sable throne; The ancient Cybele, and Idaean Jove, And last his sire below, and mother queen above. Then heav'n's high monarch thunder'd thrice aloud, And thrice he shook aloft a golden cloud. Soon thro' the joyful camp a rumour flew, The time was come their city to renew. Then every brow with cheerful green is crown'd, The feasts are doubled, and the bowls go round. When next the rosy morn disclos'd the day, The scouts to several parts divide their way, To learn the natives' names, their towns explore, The coasts and trendings of the crooked shore. Here Tiber flows, and here Numicus stands. Here warlike Latins, hold the happy lands. The pious chief, who sought by peaceful ways to found his empire, and his town to raise, 100 youths from all his train selects, and to the Latian court their course directs. The spacious palace where their prince resides, and all their heads with wreaths of olive hides. They go commission'd to require a peace, and carry presents to procure access. Thus, while they speed their pace, the prince designs his new elected seat, and draws the lines. The Trojans round the place a rampire cast, and palisades about the trenches placed. Meantime the train, proceeding on their way, from far the town and lofty towers survey. At length approach the walls. Without the gate they see the boys and Latian youth debate the martial prizes on the dusty plain. Some drive the cars, and some the coursers rein. Some bend the stubborn bow for victory, and some with darts their active sinews try. A posting messenger, dispatch'd from hence, of this fair troop advis'd their aged prince, that foreign men of mighty stature came, uncouth their habit, and unknown their name. The king ordains their entrance, and ascends his regal seat, surrounded by his friends. A palace, built by Picus, vast and proud, supported by 100 pillars stood, and round encompass'd with a rising wood. The pile o'erlook'd the town, and drew the sight, surpris'd at once with reverence and delight. There kings receiv'd the marks of sov'reign pow'r, in state the monarchs march'd, the lictors bore their awful axes, and the rods before. Here the tribunal stood, the house of prayer, and here the sacred senators repair. All at large tables, in long order set, a ram their offering, and a ram their meat. Above the portal, carved in cedar wood, placed in their ranks, their godlike grandsires stood. Old Saturn with his crooked scythe on high, and Italus that led the colony, and ancient Janus with his double face and bunch of keys, the porter of the place. There good Sabinus, planter of the vines, on a short pruning hook his head reclines, and studiously surveys his gen'rous wines. Then warlike kings, who for their country fought, and honorable wounds from battle brought. Around the posts hung helmets, darts, and spears, and captive chariots, axes, shields, and bars, and broken beaks of ships, the trophies of their wars. Above the rest, as chief of all the band, was Picus placed, a buckler in his hand. His other wav'd a long divining wand. Girt in his Gaban gown the hero sate, yet could not with his art avoid his fate. For Circe long had lov'd the youth in vain, till love, refus'd, converted to disdain. Then mixing powerful herbs with magic art, she chang'd his form, who could not change his heart. Constrain'd him in a bird, and made him fly with party-colour'd plumes, a chattering pie. In this high temple, on a chair of state, the seat of audience, old Latinus sate, and gave admission to the Trojan train, and thus with pleasing accents he began: "Tell me, ye Trojans, for that name you own, nor is your course upon our coasts unknown. Say what you seek, and whither were you bound? Were you by stress of weather cast aground? Such dangers as on seas are often seen, and oft befall to miserable men. Or come, your shipping in our ports to lay, spent and disabled in so long a way. Say what you want; the Latians you shall find, not forc'd to goodness, but by will inclined. For since the time of Saturn's holy reign, his hospitable customs we retain. I call to mind, but time the tale has worn, th' Aurunci told, that Dardanus, though born on Latian plains, yet sought the Phrygian shore, and Samothracia, Samos call'd before. From Tuscan Coritum he claim'd his birth, but after, when exempt from mortal earth, from thence ascended to his kindred skies, a god, and, as a god, augments their sacrifice. He said. Ilioneus made this reply: O king of Faunus' royal family, nor wintry winds to Latium forc'd our way, nor did the stars our wand'ring course betray. Willing we sought your shores, and hither bound, the port so long desir'd at length we found. From our sweet homes and ancient realms expell'd, great as the greatest that the sun beheld, the god began our line who rules above. And, as our race, our king descends from Jove, and hither are we come, by his command, to crave admission in your happy land. How dire a tempest from Mycenae pour'd our plains, our temples, and our town devour'd! What was the waste of war? What fierce alarms shook Asia's crown with European arms? Even such have heard, if such there be, whose earth is bounded by the frozen sea, and such as, born beneath the burning sky and sultry sun, betwixt the tropics lie. From that dire deluge, through the watery waste, such length of years, such various perils past, at last escaped, to Latium we repair, to beg what you without your want may spare. The common water, and the common air, sheds which ourselves will build, and mean abodes, fit to receive and serve our banish'd gods. Nor our admission shall your realm disgrace, nor length of time our gratitude efface. Besides, what endless honour you shall gain, to save and shelter Troy's unhappy train! Now by my sov'reign and his fate I swear, renown'd for faith in peace, for force in war. Oft our alliance other lands desir'd, and what we seek of you, of us requir'd. Despite not then that in our hands we bear these holy boughs, sue with words of prayer. Fate and the gods by their supreme command have doom'd our ships to seek the Latian land. To these abodes our fleet Apollo sends. Here Dardanus was born, and hither tends, where Tuscan Tiber rolls with rapid force, and where Numicus opes his holy source. Besides, our prince presents, with his request, some small remains of what his sire possess'd. This golden charger, snatch'd from burning Troy, Anchises did in sacrifice employ. This royal robe and this tiara wore old Priam, and this golden scepter bore in full assemblies, and in solemn games. These purple vests were weav'd by Dardan dames. Thus while he spoke, Latinus roll'd around his eyes, and fix'd a while upon the ground. Intent he seem'd, and anxious in his breast, not by the scepter mov'd or kingly vest, but pond'ring future things of wondrous weight, succession, empire, and his daughter's fate. On these he mus'd within his thoughtful mind, and then revolv'd what Faunus had divined. This was the foreign prince, by fate decreed to share his scepter and Lavinia's bed. This was the race that sure portents foreshew to sway the world, and land and sea subdue. At length he rais'd his cheerful head and spoke: "The powers," said he, "the powers we both invoke, To you, and yours, and mine, propitious be, and firm our purpose with their augury. Have what you ask, your presents I receive, land where and when you please, with ample leave. Partake and use my kingdom as your own, all shall be yours, while I command the crown. And if my wish'd alliance please your king, tell him he should not send the peace, but bring. Then let him not a friend's embraces fear, the peace is made when I behold him here. Besides this answer, tell my royal guest, I add to his commands my own request. One only daughter heirs my crown and state, whom not our oracles, nor heaven, nor fate, nor frequent prodigies permit to join with any native of the Ausonian line. A foreign son-in-law shall come from far, such is our doom, a chief renown'd in war, whose race shall bear aloft the Latian name, and through the conquer'd world diffuse our fame. Himself to be the man the fates require, I firmly judge, and, what I judge, desire. He said, and then on each bestow'd a steed. 300 horses, in high stables fed, stood ready, shining all, and smoothly dress'd. Of these he chose the fairest and the best, to mount the Trojan troop. At his command the steeds caparison'd with purple stand, with golden trappings glorious to behold, and champ betwixt their teeth the foaming gold. Then to his absent guest the king decreed a pair of coursers born of heav'nly breed, who from their nostrils breathed ethereal fire, whom Circe stole from her celestial sire, by substituting mares produc'd on earth, whose wombs conceiv'd a more than mortal birth. These draw the chariot which Latinus sends, and the rich present to the prince commends. Sublime on stately steeds the Trojans borne, to their expecting lord with peace return. But jealous Juno from Pachynus' height, as she from Argos took her airy flight, beheld with envious eyes this hateful sight. She saw the Trojan and his joyful train descend upon the shore, desert the main, design a town, and with unhoped success th' ambassadors return with promis'd peace. Then, pierc'd with pain, she shook her haughty head, sigh'd from her inward soul, and thus she said: "O hated offspring of my Phrygian foes! O fates of Troy, which Juno's fates oppose! Could they not fall unpitied on the plain, but slain revive, and taken 'scape again? When execrable Troy in ashes lay, through fires and swords and seas they forc'd their way. Then vanquish'd Juno must in vain contend, her rage disarm'd, her empire at an end. Breathless and tir'd, is all my fury spent? Or does my glutted spleen at length relent? As if 'twere little from their town to chase, I thro' the seas pursued their exil'd race, Engag'd the heavens, oppos'd the stormy main, But billows roar'd, and tempests rag'd in vain. What have my Scyllas and my Syrtes done? When these they overpass, and those they shun, On Tiber's shores they land, secure of fate, Triumphant o'er the storms and Juno's hate. Mars could in mutual blood the Centaurs bathe, And Jove himself gave way to Cynthia's wrath, Who sent the tusky boar to Calydon. What great offence had either people done? But I, consort of the Thunderer, have waged a long and unsuccessful war, With various arts and arms in vain have toil'd, And by a mortal man at length am foil'd. If native pow'r prevail not, shall I doubt To seek for needful succour from without? If Jove and heav'n my just desires deny, Hell shall the pow'r of heav'n and Jove supply. Grant that the fates have firm'd by their decree The Trojan race to reign in Italy. At least I can defer the nuptial day, And with protracted wars the peace delay, with blood the dear alliance shall be bought, and both the people near destruction brought. So shall the son-in-law and father join, with ruin, war, and waste of either line. O fatal maid, thy marriage is endow'd with Phrygian, Latian, and Rutulian blood. Bellona leads thee to thy lover's hand; another queen brings forth another brand, to burn with foreign fires another land. A second Paris, diff'ring but in name, shall fire his country with a second flame. Thus having said, she sinks beneath the ground with furious haste, and shoots the Stygian sound, to rouse Alecto from th' infernal seat of her dire sisters, and their dark retreat. This fury, fit for her intent, she chose, one who delights in wars and human woes. Ev'n Pluto hates his own misshapen race; her sister Furies fly her hideous face. So frightful are the forms the monster takes, so fierce the hissings of her speckled snakes. Her Juno finds, and thus inflames her spite: "O virgin daughter of eternal night, give me this once thy labour to sustain my right, and execute my just disdain. Let not the Trojans, with a feign'd pretence of proffer'd peace, delude the Latian prince. Expel from Italy that odious name, and let not Juno suffer in her fame. 'Tis thine to ruin realms, or turn a state betwixt the dearest friends to raise debate, and kindle kindred blood to mutual hate. Thy hand o'er towns the funeral torch displays, and forms 1,000 ills 10,000 ways. Now shake out thy fruitful breast the seeds of envy, discord, and of cruel deeds. Confound the peace establish'd, and prepare their souls to hatred, and their hands to war." Smear'd as she was with black Gorgonian blood, the Fury sprang above the Stygian flood, and on her wicker wings, sublime thro' night, she to the Latian palace took her flight. There sought the queen's apartment, stood before the peaceful threshold, and besieg'd the door. Restless Amata lay, her swelling breast fir'd with disdain for Turnus dispossess'd, and the new nuptials of the Trojan guest. From her black bloody locks the Fury shakes her darling Plague, the fav'rite of her snakes. With her full force she threw the poisonous dart, and fix'd it deep within Amata's heart, that thus envenom'd she might kindle rage, and sacrifice to strife her house husband's age. Unseen, unfelt, the fiery serpent skims betwixt her linen and her naked limbs, his baleful breath inspiring, as he glides. Now like a chain around her neck he rides, now like a fillet to her head repairs, and with his circling volumes folds her hairs. At first the silent venom slid with ease, and seiz'd her cooler senses by degrees. Then, ere th' infected mass was fir'd too far, in plaintive accents she began the war, and thus bespoke her husband: "Shall," she said, "a wand'ring prince enjoy Lavinia's bed? If nature plead not in a parent's heart, Pity my tears, and pity her desert. I know, my dearest lord, the time will come You in vain reverse your cruel doom. The faithless pirate soon will set to sea, And bear the royal virgin far away. A guest like him, a Trojan guest before, In shew of friendship sought the Spartan shore, And ravish'd Helen from her husband bore. Think on a king's inviolable word, And think on Turnus, her once plighted lord. To this false foreigner you give your throne, And wrong a friend, a kinsman, and a son. Resume your ancient care; and if the god your sire and you resolve on foreign blood, know all are foreign, in a larger sense, not born your subjects, or deriv'd from hence. Then, if the line of Turnus you retrace, he springs from Inachus of Argive race. But when she saw her reasons idly spent, and could not move him from his fix'd intent, she flew to rage; for now the snake possess'd her vital parts, and poison'd all her breast. She raves, she runs with a distracted pace, and fills with horrid howls the public place. And as young striplings whip the top for sport, on the smooth pavement of an empty court, the wooden engine flies and whirls about, admir'd with clamours of the beardless rout. They lash aloud, each other they provoke, and lend their little souls at every stroke. Thus fares the queen, and thus her fury blows amidst the crowd, and kindles as she goes. Nor yet content, she strains her malice more, and adds new ills to those contriv'd before. She flies the town, and mixing with a throng of madding matrons, bears the bride along, wand'ring thro' the woods and wilds, and devious ways, and with these arts the Trojan match delays. She feign'd the rites of Bacchus, cried aloud, and to the buxom god the virgin vow'd. "Evoe, O Bacchus!" thus began the song, and "Evoe!" answer'd all the female throng. "O virgin, worthy thee alone!" she cried. "O worthy thee alone!" the crew replied. For thee she feeds her hair, she leads thy dance, And with thy winding ivy wreathes her lance. Like fury seize the rest, the progress known. All seek the mountains, and forsake the town; All clad in skins of beasts, the jav'lin bear, Give to the wanton winds their flowing hair, And shrieks and shoutings rend the suff'ring air. The queen herself, inspir'd with rage divine, Shook high above her head a flaming pine, Then roll'd her haggard eyes around the throng, And sung in Turnus' name the nuptial song. "O ye Latian dames, if any here Hold your unhappy queen Amata dear; If there be here," she said, "who dare maintain My right, nor think the name of mother vain, Unbind your fillets, loose your flowing hair, And orgies and nocturnal rites prepare." Book 7, Part 1.